Okay, all set, Gloria.
Great, thank you, Barb. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Special Board of Education meeting in open session this evening. I will go ahead and call the meeting to order. We will start with public input sessions. We have written statements that were sent to us starting February 12th at noon, ending February 15th at 3 p.m. today. So we've received 79 reopening plan messages. 50 have more questions they would like answered. 22 waiting to have everyone vaccinated. 3 return to in-person for all students and give parents and children the choice. 1 indicated opposed to the concurrent model, and 1 had mentioned some leadership issues, and 1 statement agree with phased reopening plan, and 12 in support of the recommendations from the Safety and Security Ad Hoc Committee. And Barb, do we have any public appearances?
Yes, we have 6 speakers registered. The first one is, I don't believe she's in the waiting room. I'm looking for Amy Hilgendorf. Not sure if she's coming in under a different name than she registered in, but I'll move to the next one, which is Bill Balden. One moment. Mr. Balden, if you could turn on your mic and share your video, we're ready for your public appearance.
Excellent. I'm on that right now. So my mic is on.
Okay.
Very good.
My video is on.
Great.
And has my 3 minutes started yet?
Go ahead, Mr. Balden. You can go ahead and get started.
Good evening. My name is Bill Balden. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I'm here tonight as a father of 2 brilliant youth in MMSD. I want to start off by appreciating the honorable service of the MMSD board members, the service that you have give to our community, recognizing your talents and sacrifices that you make in order to be on the board. I'd like to be heard in support of the recommendations submitted to the Safety and Security Ad Hoc Committee. A few years ago, I had the privilege to be a part of a team to present to the board our recommendations of removing EROs out of our high schools. The real privilege, however, was seeing and hearing and feeling the committed youth leadership without fail who attended these public spaces to uplift their voices. Now, a few years later, we are here in a time following what has been referred to as Freedom Summer 2020, where millions of people have lifted their voice to continue to be heard in resistance to anti-Black, racist, and practicing mindsets that are embedded in our culture and community. We are at a watershed moment to hear these voices and the voices of our ancestors to turn towards, embrace, and return to our indigenous knowledge and practices of restorative justice. I humbly ask that you vote in support of these recommendations. Thank you for your time.
Great, thank you, Mr. Balden.
Next speaker, Jacob Perlman.
Mr. Perlman, thank you. Welcome.
Thank you.
You can get started whenever you're ready.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time and your generous listening tonight. Please pause. Don't ask staff to open school to mass in-person learning. If we open, we risk our health and families. The district's plan would make learning worse for our kids. COVID-safe classrooms for 4, 5, and 6-year-olds will be lonely and developmentally inappropriate. Opening schools now is dangerous. The recent JAMA report said that preventing the spread of COVID in schools requires controlling community spread. The CDC officials who wrote the report said, preventing transmission in school settings will require addressing and reducing levels of transmission in the surrounding communities through the policies that interrupt transmission, like restrictions on indoor dining at restaurants. They also listed some other things we would need to do: wear masks, distance, improve our ventilation, test kids who don't look sick, allow all staff and children the choice to work from home. Our community spread is in the highest range, the red range on the new CDC chart. Dane County isn't closing businesses to protect kids and families. Officials just said that groups of 50 are okay indoors. We don't have plans for systematic testing of kids without symptoms, and a lot of kids don't get symptoms. Staff writ large don't have the option of working from home. The district has yet to update in detail about ventilation, and as for masks, the plan right now is that at lunchtime, everyone takes off their masks all at once indoors. The district has asked all elementary staff to come into buildings, unnecessarily raising the risks for everyone. But it's not just health. This plan will hurt learning. Teachers will be sitting at their computers trying to teach the kids in front of them in the classroom and the kids at home at the same time. Their attention will be divided. The in-person kids will be sitting at their computers like they would be at home. And our experience has shown that classrooms will close due to quarantines and short staffing. Transitions between in-person and virtual learning will throw everyone off. Finally, it is not right for young kids to be sitting in a single room all day, still unable to interact or be close to their friends, unable to build together with their blocks or share pancakes together from their little play kitchens. Please listen to our community, public health officials, and to the educational professionals on your staff. Pause, reconsider. You're asking us to risk our health and our families. Learning will be worse. School for our youngest will be sad. Pause, reopen once staff are vaccinated and community spread is low. Then it will be spring. Move school outside so kids can move and play. Move school outside. Focus on relationship and building resiliency. Begin again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perlman.
Next speaker, Amy Hilgendorf.
Hello, good evening. Thanks for joining us. You can go ahead and get started whenever you're ready.
Hi, thank you. My name is Amy Hilgendorf, and I am an MMS alumna and now parent to 3 district children. I'm here today to convey my support for the recommendations put forward by the Safety and Security Ad Hoc Committee. First, I want to express my gratitude again to the leaders of Freedom Inc. Youth Squad for the tireless work that began in 2016 to successfully remove Madison police from stations at our high schools. We all owe them our gratitude and admiration. Through my work life, I've engaged with many of the Safety and Security Ad Hoc Committee members as a program evaluator of Madison's Restorative Justice Coalition efforts. From that perspective, I have high confidence in the expertise of these committee members and the soundness of these recommendations. And I also know that many of them want more than what these final recommendations convey. The recommendations put forward by the Safety and Security Ad Hoc Committee point in the direction of the reimagining of school safety and accountability that is necessary. These recommendations urge school administrators, staff, and the broader school community to view young people through a lens of respect and collective care, not fear. These recommendations challenge us to recognize harm differently, what is truly harmful and to whom, and how then to respond. This includes taking accountability for the harms inflicted upon youth of color by adults in our schools, especially when adults call police on children, and then working through the kinds of processes indicated here to repair those harms. These recommendations also urge us to put the time and resources and care behind what this kind of paradigmatic shift will require. This is not the district's strong suit historically. Instead, the district gives up on new and important efforts before they have given what's needed to see success. And in part, I think this is because the district has not been willing to give control to those who are most impacted and therefore best positioned to enact these changes. As such, I encourage the board to go beyond these recommendations and to examine again Freedom Inc.'s proposal for a community control over school safety committee, which would establish a permanent and youth-led accountability body with complete oversight and control over school safety and accountability. This proposed committee goes beyond the limitations of a typical advisory and thus the tendencies to ignore such bodies, and brings forward a structure and a process that can get at the roots of the harms that Black and Brown youth experience in Madison schools. The committee is where the possibility for transformation lies, and I urge you to put your time, energy, and resources to realizing this vision. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ms. Hagendorf. Have a good night.
Next speaker is Martha Sorebo.
Hi, Martha. Thanks for
Hello.
joining us. You can go ahead and get started.
I'm going to have my video off, otherwise my computer tends to lag on me. Thank you
Sure.
very much.
Mhm.
I wanted to say a few things today because I was on the Safety and Security Ad Hoc Committee, and I felt that I was very appreciative of everybody's role that was on there. I enjoyed all the work that was being done. It was such an honor to be part of that discussion and to hear what everybody had to say. But I was also left feeling very disheartened because I felt that the end of it was very rushed. I was really impressed with what Bianca and Freedom Inc. had to offer. I think it was the second to last meeting that we had, because it was a very comprehensive piece that they put together, which covered a lot of areas, and I was able to talk to her outside of the committee in order to get down some very relevant information and to be able to work together. And during those ad hoc committees, because everything is over Zoom and the room is so big, it was very hard to connect with everybody on the panel. And so at the very end, I felt like I was actually able to collaboratively work with someone. And then the end of it just felt extremely rushed. There's so much good work behind here. There was already one ad hoc committee that started some of this, which we kind of built upon. And then whenever I asked for more information regarding our students with disabilities and the needs and the issues that they run into, I was constantly being notified that the information that I was looking for was not collected. So it seems that we are collecting data, but it's not relevant data if we can't use it. And I just got something back last week of some open records requests that I was looking for, because we can't just look to see how many kids with IEPs are having interactions with the SROs that we had. We have to know why. We can't just say, oh, they have their, like, was it behavior? What is something more standard? And I had a lot of conversations to make sure I was asking the right questions. So I think there is more work that needs to be done. I believe that the security ad hoc members were going to be invited to continue the work, which I think is incredibly important. And I will be looking forward to being part of that in the future. But again, I give a lot of credence to Bianca and Freedom Inc. and the work that they did, which is why at the very end, I abstained from voting to end the meeting, because I literally thought that we were not finished. I felt that it was just ended early, and our conversations should have been more collaborative. And I know that there were some hard points that we had to, that the board needed us to come to an end to. But I just don't believe it was, I don't think it was ready to end. So those are my thoughts, but thank you very much for letting me come up here and say these things. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Martha, for your time. Have a good evening.
You too, thanks.
Next speaker is Anna Hauser.
Hi, my name is Anna Hauser. I'm gonna, I'm gonna be video off. I have some internet instability right now.
Sure.
But I am a parent of 3 children in the district, currently 1 who attends the district, and I have some concerns about where the reopening plan addresses equitable education for students in special education. Currently, my child, a high schooler, has the right to be in school. Like he's given that option, but his medical needs keep him from being there. So my child is not currently using that. However, I'm aware that the factions that are at his school are having one-to-one education, and those students, I'm concerned what that looks like for them, because if they are in person, what happens for those students who aren't masking, and their safety and their ability to have a quality education, and what's the plan for that? Which kind of leads into my other feeling, is that one of the things that I really feel has been missing is transparency about what, the issues of students with disability. It's just been, well, here's what's going to happen to all of the kids, without any conversation about, like, well, here's what's going to happen for special ed. And so I think that we need to make sure that we're including them in the general education conversation, so that the community sees them as part of the communication. I think that's a really important part of inclusion, is making sure that everybody gets to see the whole picture. So that's just kind of where I'm sitting. And so I guess I just think that before we go to reopening, we just need to make sure that there's a plan for equity and the prevention of displacement. And as I mentioned, my child is currently virtual, and I have concerns about, like right now, learning is hard enough. But I know that Mr. Perlman mentioned this earlier, but I'm, very concerned about what a chaotic special ed room might look like. And then my child, who's also trying to communicate with alternative communication, and he uses an eye gaze device to speak. So I'm just concerned that he won't be able to interact, that he will no longer have any meaningful education. And so I really think that, until we have those kinds of pieces in place, it's, even everybody's mentioned the other pieces, but that's one of my biggest pieces that I feel is missing to the reopening plan, is just having that piece of information. So, and I do recognize, and I want to just tell you, thank you all. I appreciate all the hard work that you're putting into it. I don't want to just like come on and complain. I'm a little frazzled. We've been in appointments all day, but I do understand that there are a lot of big, hard decisions being made. And I do understand that, we're trying to do the best for everybody. But this is our corner of the world, and we just kind of wanted to shed light on how that is and our concerns in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hauser. Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Final speaker is, her first name is OONA.
Hi, this is Una. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, I had a little technical difficulty there. I'm Una Maxey Green. I grew up in Madison. I attended Franklin, Randall, Hamilton, West High School, and I am here to speak about the recommendations from the Safety and Security Ad Hoc Committee. And much like Amy, who spoke earlier, to speak in support of those recommendations, but to also ask that you consider making investments that go well beyond those as well. I'd really like to center and stand in solidarity with the demands of the Freedom Youth Squad, particularly their demands for community control over school safety and accountability. I think a lot of this work is really overdue, and growing up in Madison, I have seen firsthand how we often make commitments that are lip service, but they aren't backed up by the resources that they need to be successful, or by the real accountability measures that need to be in place to shift power and to change institutions. And so I just want to center a few of their specific demands to have an accountability process for school staff who use police to harm children, calling for investments in leadership, wellness, and creativity of Black youth and youth of color, and for transformative justice instead of punishment, and to give the most impacted youth, parents, and trusted adults real decision-making power over schools. And it's very different being here tonight via Zoom than it is to show up in person at school board meetings, and a much smaller group of folks testifying tonight than I know y'all have heard from over the many years that Black and Southeast Asian youth have been organizing and showing up and speaking out about all of that. So I would just hope that y'all are considering their voices and have everything that you have heard for those that have been on the board for the last few years, all of the really powerful, impactful testimony that they have shared about the real impacts that these changes have on youth in schools, and to consider that as you're making your decisions about these recommendations and about what more the school board can do beyond those recommendations to make these really essential and long overdue changes within MMSD school system. Thanks for your time tonight.
Great, thank you.
That was our final speaker.
Okay, great, thank you, Barb.
Process question, Chair. Is it
Sure. Go ahead, Nikki.
Is it possible that because the reopening, we've had so many questions on it, if we could take it out of order and have that heard first and the safety and security held second because of the sheer number of people and questions involved in it?
Let's go ahead and take a vote on that. I know that
Great.
we have our safety and security shouldn't take as long. And so
Yep.
I'm hoping that, you know, it wouldn't take as long. So maybe we get that out of the way, but let's go ahead and take a vote. Nikki, thanks for bringing that up.
I'll say I see several staff present who are involved on that committee and the work present. Just want to be respectful of their time on this call as well, because I imagine the reopening conversation being quite lengthy.
Thank you, Sabian. Can we just, before we're not even in discussion yet. So Nikki, is that a motion?
That is a motion.
Do we have a second?
I can second, Ananda.
Okay, Ananda second. Okay, discussion.
Yeah, I really appreciate Nikki putting this question up. I think it emphasizes the importance of what we need to be discussing. I do agree with Savian. There's folks from the committee that are here to speak, and I do think, because I know my colleagues, to the extent that I know my colleagues, I know there will be a lot of support and words of gratitude. So I'm wondering, Nikki, if we can just continue with the order. But I just wanted to say I really appreciate you moving this item up.
I could withdraw the motion. I just didn't want to ignore the importance of the topic because I didn't notice the amount of staff here that is speaking on it, and I don't want to waste anyone's time. Ananda, I think you hit it on the head. I just wanted to stress the seriousness of the issue.
Great, thank you, Nikki. So you withdraw the motion. All right.
Yep, withdrawn.
Thank you. All right, so next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. I move to approve the minutes from the special meeting and open session dated January 11th, 2021.
Second, Nikki.
Second, Nikki. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor, aye, with show of hands so I can see him.
Aye, Ali Muldrow.
Okay, Ali Muldrow, okay. 7-0, motion passes. Next is the recommendations from the Safety and Security Ad Hoc Committee. I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Savian.
Thank you so much, Gloria. I'm just going to start off with some opening comments and then set it up for the rest of us to discuss. So at this time, I really hope we will continue taking the time to reflect on the events of last summer. Like many summers in our history, it was sweltering hot and the calls for justice were loud. We must always remember the lives of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, as well as the many others lost to injustice in this country. During a global health pandemic, the original pandemic of America, racism and white supremacy raged on. We also witnessed people of all ages, young people of all ages, right here in our own community, students here in MMSD, take up the mantle of fighting and searching for justice in our communities. Their leadership and activism should be admired by all of us. Through our collective power as a school board, we must also do our job in bending the arc of our community towards justice for all people. We only started this work by terminating the contract with our police department. The start was prompted by us seeing the empowering environments we want for all students not being compatible with a repressive policing institution in America. As I've said before, these recommendations are just the first step of this journey. As the conversations of this committee work evolved, we all acknowledge this work as ubiquitous and interconnected in terms of rooting out harmful systems, policies, practices, and cultures of racism and repression, from classrooms to pedagogy, lesson plans, to the BEP and teacher diversity and the lack of opportunity for our Black and Brown youth in this community. This conversation requires everyone to step back, reflect, and think, have we done right by our Black and Brown children? The recommendations we're taking up are wide-ranging and comprehensive, yet these recommendations are not a total and complete solution to our needs. There is no panacea in this list of recommendations. Some of them are fiscal, a few are policy, but a lot of them come down to practices, cultures, and strategies we have to embrace or no longer embrace as a district. It's going to take the commitment of all of us over years to right these wrongs. I ask all of us to let this work continue under the Superintendent Committee headed by Dr. Jenkins, with myself as a liaison, to report out on our progress. As a board, we must have a universal envisioning conversation for developing equitable, anti-racist definitions of justice, safety, accountability, and belonging. We have to ask safety, accountability, and belonging for whom and for why. We need to discover, do all of our students see themselves in these definitions? And as we ask these questions, we acknowledge the work of restorative justice, truth and reconciliation, and change is before us. So I recommend that we receive the recommendations and task administration with forming that committee headed by Dr. Jenkins to report out every 2 months on their progress. For transparency, I will be a liaison to report out as well. And at this point, I welcome any questions or comments we have for, the work of the committee members that are on this meeting right now. Nikki?
Thank you, Savion, for that. Before we move on to Nikki, thank you for that opening. What we'll do is we'll go ahead and open it up for questions, comments, as Savion suggested, and then we'll close out with a motion to approve the recommendations that I will make. So go ahead, Nikki.
I appreciate what you said, Savion, with one thing I would change. And that would be, can we please include the statistics on individuals with disabilities when we're dealing with suspensions and arrests, because I think that's important. Your statement is absolutely necessary. What our community has not done for Black and Brown children is inexcusable, and it has caused irreparable harm. The only other thing I would add was, please include ableism, because a lot of times people assume that if you are disabled, that that's just the way things are supposed to be. You don't think that, you're wise enough not to, but I just want to honor our commitment as a board to that topic, because that way all our students start to realize that they are indeed, their lives matter and that they are important. And may we learn from what happened in 2020 and amplify the voices of our youth rather than ignore the voices of our youth until it spills over. And I thank you for your work.
Thank you, Nikki. Any other comments? Ali?
Yeah, I want to thank the entire committee for their work, and I want to highlight the young people who have been leading this conversation for years at a grassroots level across our district and bringing attention to disparities in discipline. I really appreciate what Board Member Castro had to say in your opening remarks, in terms of, really committing to this work. And I fully support Savian Castro as a liaison for the board in continuing this work. I do think when we talk about those most impacted, we often make that obscure and separate from ourselves and forget that some of us occupy the identities that are most likely to be criminalized. And I think in putting, Dr. Jenkins and Savian Castro, at the helm of this work and in the lead of this work, we are acknowledging the positionality of folks on this board and folks within our community, and emphasizing their leadership and their experience. So I'm proud of the work you all have done thus far. I'm excited to see where the work keeps going. And I guess I am curious as to how much of the committee that currently exists will become that superintendent advisory committee, or will continue to be a part of this work, because it seems like folks are deeply passionate about continuing to develop this work, and hoping to carry on the conversation.
Thank you, Ali. Any others?
Yeah, I'll just say everybody who is a participant in the ad hoc will receive an invitation.
Ananda?
Thank you, President Gloria. I just have some brief remarks. I'm probably one of the few or only school board member that has had many roles connected with the school district. Mother, parent, parent leader, charter board member, employee, and now board member. Since elected, there has been pivotal moments that I witnessed the white supremacy pillars of the school district being shaken. This is one of them. In the last decade, we moved from a board that I was learning or skeptical about restorative justice to a district, skeptical about restorative district, a district that had invested minimally to this work and often led by white people. We had made long progress towards the true sentiment of restorative justice. I really hope that what we're doing today, what we're moving today, is one of those steps towards that progress, and that we acknowledge a lot more is still to come. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Ananda. Any others? Chris Carusi?
Thanks, Gloria. I want to send out my own thanks to the members of the ad hoc committee for all the time and the many, many meetings you attended, and for the work that clearly went into these recommendations that you presented us. Thank you very, very much. Much appreciated. I just have a couple comments. Ollie, I really appreciated your comments about the Superintendent's Advisory Committee. Savian, I'm really glad to hear that you will be actively engaged as a liaison between the board and that committee. I think that role is incredibly important. Ollie and I and others actually on this call were part of an earlier Superintendent's Advisory Committee that began as a committee specifically about the BEP, but grew to have a broader mission of being a Superintendent's Advisory Committee on restorative approaches to behavior in the district. And I feel like that committee was not a success story for MMSD, and we have to do better. And part of the reason it was not a success story is there was no communication between the work of that committee and the work of the board. The board has to be actively engaged in conversations about moving this district towards restorative justice for that work to succeed. If we're just passive observers debating whether or not to allocate budget to things that are recommended by a superintendent's committee, it's not going to work. We have to make a commitment to this work, and I think we need to be actively engaged in public conversations about how we're going to get there. So I just want to put that out there, and Savian, I have full faith in you to do great things and make sure that the board is engaged in that work. So thank you so much. My second question is, I'm curious why the committee made recommendations to bring in restorative justice coordinators, a total of 8, which is a lot of FTE, instead of more psychologists or counselors, which we know we are desperately in need of in our high schools. I absolutely appreciate the focus on having staff dedicated to the work of restorative justice. But if we were to hire counselors or psychologists or even school nurses who had backgrounds in trauma-informed care and restorative justice, I feel like that would be an even, that would do the dual purpose of like helping us refocus our approach to working with children, especially children of color, and also providing the need for student services that has been very clearly articulated by many people, including children of color who have attended our board meetings and talked to us about what they need. So I just was curious why the decision was made to add administrative positions instead of student services positions.
Sabian, do you want to answer that as being, or do you want me to, or Ananda, you have a question?
Just have a clarifying questions for Chris. I'm just asking to see, are you saying that restorative justice practitioners are the same, or I'm confused to your comment around comparing social workers and counselors to restorative justice practitioners? Do you think that they are mutually like interchangeable, that counselors and social workers are like more than restorative justice practitioners? I'm a bit confused by your question. I just wanted to clarify.
I think a lot of it is just the type of job we're hiring for. We might end up hiring a coordinator for restorative justice who's got a strong background in social work, but that's not the same as opening up a social work or a psych or a nursing position in the district. And someone who comes in as a nurse or a psychologist or a counselor as opposed to a coordinator is potentially going to have a different skill set. Coordinator is an administrative position, so they might come in with a background or a set of skills in nursing or counseling, and they might not. So just given the very clear need we have for student services in our high schools, I'm just curious why we lean towards hiring administrators.
Thank you, Chris. Sabian, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I'll say that the recommendations did also include increased school support staff, such as nurses and counselors. We do have some school staff here, Devon, Marcus, Anthony, Corvan, Patrice, just that, if need for that dedicated RJ position. I think I think you're absolutely right, Chris, in that, mental health is such a huge aspect of this and addressing those trauma-informed care needs. But in terms of there being like a dedicated staff person for RJ implementation, because right now, I'm guessing some of the school staff can speak to this much better than I can.
Well, I think that, just to add on before I hand it to Patrice, who's turned on her camera, and Marcus, we did have significant conversation around, the staff needs, and we had restorative justice experts as part of our committee, and they had a wealth of information and knowledge. I think, Chris, our conversations was really not about just restorative justice. It was really building a comprehensive plan that will include, professional social workers, et cetera, but mental health experts, right? And so it's not mutually exclusive. I think that it was because of the committee's recommendations and the people who serve on this committee who were restorative justice practitioners really know that this work, restorative justice practices within our schools, if done right, works. And we really wanted to build that on based on what we were hearing from this committee. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Patrice if you want to get us started.
Thank you. So I think that, Chris, that's a great question that we did talk a lot about. And I will speak from like a social work background, right? Like I'm a school social worker by trade, and like been somebody who often does restorative justice in buildings. And one of the biggest things that we know is that when there's a crisis or something is happening, the first thing to go is that preventative RJ work, and that what is so important and needs to be like tended to at all times. And so we thought that one of the benefits of having a coordinator position, and it doesn't, and like, I don't think any time when we use the word like RJ coordinator, was it about like an administrative position or anything like that, but it was really about somebody who is 100% dedicated to that work, because it often is the first thing to leave someone's plate when the plate is overflowing, which we know everyone's is, right? And so one thing that I'm thinking about is like, when we're having someone who's a coordinator, how are they working with teachers in classrooms? How are they supporting like the overall professional development in school climate and community? Also, it's not just one or the other. It's not just like waiting for a crisis to happen. How are they working with community partners and community members, families, and students to do that good, proactive, restorative work when we need it? And like, kind of sometimes it's right at the drop, right? It's a drop of the dime when something happens in a building and you need someone to pick that up. And if you have a caseload because you are also the, social worker for 2 neighborhoods, or you have 6 IEPs that day, like, it's really difficult to manage both of those and to give it its fair, like, justice and its fair attention. So I really think that it's just important that we like have someone who can also tend to that need that we've all talked about being incredibly important.
All right, Chris, you have any other questions?
I see Anthony's hand real quick, sorry.
All right, Anthony.
Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
I just wanted to say to speak very candidly, as we think about our district, there's not a lot of Black and brown social workers. So when thinking about this role, to me, it's another way that we want to think about diversifying our staff. Because in my role, I'm not social worker, I'm not psychologist or any of that stuff, but I promise children run to me when they have issues, when they're trying to solve issues. So that's one of the reasons I made the recommendation, is that it's another way to diversify our staff, because we don't have last I checked, we don't have Black and brown psychologists, social workers just waiting to come to the district. And so I think that's something that we just got to address, right? Our district is starting to look more and more like the kids who are struggling, but the staff doesn't always reflect that. And so this role is a great opportunity to connect in that way and create more diverse staffs within our school. So to me, it was a no-brainer. It's how we bring more people from the community, how we bring more people who are, experts at their experience to have an impact in our schools. And so I will say what I do in the school is not limited by my title or by my role, right? It's limited by what I'm willing to do or not do to make sure that our children are successful. And so as I thought about these roles, or the role, it was really about creating another touch point for our Black and brown students, which we know suffer greatly due to a number of disparities. So I just wanted to put it out there. It's to get diversity in the building. That's got to be one of the goals. If we're really about this anti-racist work, if we're really about this social and emotional learning, and we're trying to move towards showing our kids something different.
Thank you, Anthony. Great point. Thank you for that. Marcus?
Yeah, I will echo all of Anthony and Patrice's sentiments that they have shared, and just encouraging the board. One thing I want to reinforce is just encouraging the board members to really, as we're thinking about safety, and we're thinking about safety and security, and we're talking about this conversation, it's not something that happens outside of the classroom. And that was one of the main reasons we focused on a position that would work to change the culture of the school, rather than a lot of the things that our social workers do and our counselors do, the great work that they do. Oftentimes that happens outside of our classrooms. And when we're talking about safety and security for our Black and brown kids, we want them to feel safe when they step inside the classroom. And a lot of that is culture work, and a lot of that is structural work that does need to happen. And it's a heavy lift. And so having a position that is dedicated to that is vital, because counselors, they have a whole set of jobs that they have to do on top of the additional things that we ask them to do, as well as social workers. So that's just something to be mindful of. Again, I'm also a social worker by trade, even though I'm in a dean position now. And as Patrice stated, and I won't, talk over her points, it's a lot to ask. And oftentimes the great work of transformative and restorative justice gets taken off of our plates because of the immediacy of some of the other things that we need to deal with. And so having a person who the restorative work is their immediacy is vital for it to take hold and to really live in our schools. Otherwise, it becomes another thing that we say we do, but we don't do it well because we haven't really committed people to the actual work.
Thank you, Marcus. Johnny?
Yeah, real quick, I thank you, everybody, for allowing me to join tonight. In addition to what Marcus, Anthony, and what Patrice has said, the issue that we also need to learn and address is the 2 to 3% of the students that give us 50 to 70% of the issues in our building. Brother Kervon Gaines brought up a situation while we were working in an ad hoc committee about a young man that went to the restorative justice circle 2, 3, 4, or 5 times, got his hand slapped and a warning. Once that person graduated, now they're locked up in jail due to the fact that they've stolen a car. I bring that up to say that on a regular basis, my students, our students, report to me about kids that have gone astray because they had nobody to guide them. So if we're gonna really do this correct, like what Brother Marcus said, we need to start with the classrooms, the teachers, the first line of people that can intervene, make a difference in everybody's life. And just because you're a teacher does not mean that you cannot take time to invest in that person. At La Follette, those that know me and those that have been there before, the key thing that we need to learn is to get a sense of communication that can go both ways so that we can stop this unnecessary violence and build holistic students once they graduate. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you, all of you, for your perspective on this and answering that question. I mean, we had a phenomenal team. We had a phenomenal team that consisted of staff who really know our students, who are engaged with our students every day, particularly those students that are most vulnerable, that they go to Anthony, Johnny, Patrice, for support every day. And so, and Marcus, right? I mean, so thank you for answering that question. Chris, did you have any other further questions?
I really, really appreciate what Marcus, Anthony, Patrice, and Johnny had to say. Thank you so much for those remarks. That clarified things for me greatly, and I have no more comments.
Great, thank you. Nikki, before I go to you, I know
Of course.
you've already gone, and we'll move to Christina Gomes-Schmidt. I think you had your hands up.
Yeah, thanks. Just if Nikki has is that a clarifying comment? Okay, all right.
Well, it was more a question of process because I was confused on something, if that's okay.
Okay, sure, go ahead, Nikki.
It's just, do we address the questions on this to Savian or do we address them to Gloria? I don't want to be disrespectful. I'm just not quite sure who I was supposed to address it to.
That's fine. Either way.
Or chair.
Both Savion and I were co-chairs.
Okay.
Yep.
Just wanted to make sure I wasn't trying to offend. It just I didn't know who to, and I was hoping I didn't offend.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you for that. Christina?
Thanks, Gloria. And I just want to echo the thanks to everyone, the members of the Safety and Security Ad Hoc Committee who took on this work, diving into the issues, deliberating, crafting these recommendations for the district to move forward on this really important and comprehensive work in our high schools. In the recommendations themselves, I appreciate the focus on training and professional development and restorative justice, the increased support for students, professionalizing the role of the safety and security assistants, and a comprehensive look at how to reimagine schools so that they're better meeting students' needs. I'm going to be quite honest, last June when we voted to remove the SROs from our schools, I was highly concerned that we acted as a board without having a plan in place. Having been given the time and space to create these recommendations, I've appreciated that and have appreciated all the work that has gone into this. I'm looking to better understand how these recommendations will fit into our larger district safety and security plan, and the building level work that needs to happen. And so my first question is also, it's a process question kind of, and a timeline question. What's the process for prioritizing the actions that are needed most urgently versus the long-term advisory committee work that's being done? And I appreciate, I think Marcus spoke to it and sort of clarified how it's going to be both long-term work and immediate work that happens with these positions. And so, I mean, I guess my question is, what do our schools need right now from a personnel standpoint? We have funds that are set aside to hire a position for each school. Is it the restorative justice position that we need right now, or does the committee see that role as a more long-term solution? I guess, how does it fit into our immediate budget process for this year in the next month?
So I think as far as your budget question, it fits, right? I mean, I think you all will have to incorporate these recommendations into your budget. Like, there is no time to think about it, to wait. I mean, we had a committee that did a lot of work. And so you all have to take what is coming from these recommendations and put them into action through our budget conversations for next year. But you're right. I mean, I think we have to really consider what is it that we need immediately for as we are thinking about reopening high schools up this year for 2021. And so those are the considerations and conversations we'll have to have. And I think, Savion, you had your hand up. I'm not sure. Did you want to respond to her?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say we'll have the opportunity to provide some direction at our next operation work group in March for Kelly. And yeah, and and additionally, during those report out meetings, we'll have an opportunity to provide direction and immediacy too. In terms of most important, I do believe that we're going to set aside dedicate some funds for professional development and the dedicated positions we need immediately this year. But as that 3 to 5 year implementation plan gets more fleshed out, we'll certainly have more guidance too. Karen or Bryn, I'm not sure if you wanted to say anything.
Well, first of all, I'd like to just say thank you to Gloria and Savion for your leadership and assisting with this process since the summer. Just kind of highlight that enough to both of you. With that, I do know that we heard of the urgency for those positions. And so I'll have Bryn talk more about that and how that's going to factor into already some of the work that her team is doing. Bryn?
Sorry. I am using my Santa Cruz background right now. No, I mean, I think, and I know Kelly Ruppel's on here too. It's a balance of we're obviously continuing with our work and pre-planning to be ready for whatever the board moves forward here. And also, we just really also want to honor where the recommendations ended up in terms of prioritizing this collaborative planning process. So we can, I think, as I understand the process, like if admin is requested to come back with budget, we can come back with budget in March.
Great, thank you, Bryn. Ananda, did you have a follow-up based on Christina's
question? Yeah, no, not
okay,
a follow-up.
Then we'll go back to Christina. Christina, did you have Any follow-up questions?
Yeah, I had another question that sort of focuses on high school staff and how they fit into the plan going forward. So more comprehensive, all of our school staff in our 4 high schools. So given that we need staff buy-in and engagement to be successful in implementing recommendations and the more comprehensive restorative justice, I'm sort of thinking through how do we get that buy-in with the process? And I'm kind of wondering, given the expertise and the work and the knowledge of our school staff who have participated in the ad hoc committee. I really appreciate you all. Anthony, Marcus, Corvan, Patrice, Johnny. I'm not sure if I'm missing anybody, but I'm just really appreciating your voice and your expertise in this. I'm wondering if these staff members are going to have a chance to go back and present the recommendations at a staff meeting in their high schools, or how that might look or work. So that more people start understanding sort of the process and what the work is going forward.
I think that is an operational question. I know Dr. Jenkins, Karen, any plans? Have you thought about how these recommendations are going to be shared and conveyed to staff?
Well, from my thought, as I've been thinking about this, I'm very excited. First of all, let me just say thank you to everyone who's done this work as I've watched it from afar. And I need to uplift another question in terms of this is part of what they were saying early on, some of the staff. This has to be work done with the people and by the people. I've talked about it since I've gotten here, how we need to put the schools in the community and the communities in the schools. And this is one of those opportunities. So to predetermine how everything is going to go, I don't think that's going to be best. Tonight, the board is going to make a decision, then we'll come to the table. I would like to uplift what Mr. Ward started talking about when we were talking about the various staffing. They've made some strong recommendations with a lot of thoughts behind it. But we have to go back to what we're always talking about. We're a district that's practicing being anti-racist. And we have to watch how even the conversation flow and how we allow the thoughts of individuals really impact this work. So I would just go back to say that we're going to wait to receive it and then pull the committee together and take the thoughts of the individuals about how they best think it should be shared out. That's the way we get real reciprocal accountability. They can participate in the process of laying things out. That's the buy-in. Back to the earlier question. I think, Chris, you had asked that too.
Great, thank you, Dr. Jenkins. Karen, did you want to say something?
I also want to just uplift the staff that joined the ad hoc committee. They did take it very seriously. And so when the initial draft of the recommendations, they took them back to their teams at the school level. I know Anthony Ward, Marcus Flowers, Corvin Gaines, they brought back feedback from their staff, their administrators. So getting that initial look at it, so that did serve in that purpose. One other opportunity, I know this has not the response to this question, but Anthony Ward is one of the first lead SSAs in MMSD. It's because of the initial work and approval from the board. So I just want to really lift him up today as a leader and really serves that. So thank you to the board for, approving the lead SSAs. He certainly is taking that job very seriously. So thank you.
Congratulations, Anthony. We expect great things from you.
Thank you.
Christina, did you have further questions?
That's all my questions. Thank you.
Okay, Ananda. Oh, I'm sorry, Nikki and then Ananda. Nikki, did you have, you already asked your question. That's right. Okay.
Yep,
Ananda.
I'm good. Thank you.
Ananda?
I just wanted to share a couple of comments from that some of my colleagues asked or brought it up before. One, to the earlier question that Chris asked, I just wanted to clarify, I am in full support of adding more social workers and counselors and overall support staff. I ran my campaign in full support of that. My daughter is a direct beneficiary of a lot of those supports and someone that still needs those supports to be happening. And I know that's true to many of our students, and definitely COVID has brought even more challenges to that when we don't have enough staff in our school district to support the mental health needs of our students. I think my question was mostly around this, that we often get into this paradigm that like if we do restorative justice, we're not doing mental health. And I see those two as interesting connects. And I do think that we can do both in our district. Is a matter of whether or not we value all those things. And sometimes asking questions like that is almost like, oh, so we hired restorative justice and we don't have money to hire social workers. And that's not the case. We want to our student services, our student service staff, to know that we value them, in particular this moment of all times. And we also value restorative justice and restorative practices in our district. And we rely on those practices to be a district that's much more humane to many of our students. And in regards to buy-in, I actually don't want staff to just agree to do a thing that they don't believe or they don't think is important. What I'm most interested is that people feel like that is what is going to help our district be more humane. That will have a district that is actually breathing a much more justice way to educate our children. So I just wanted to say those two comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ananda. Any others? All right, well, I'll go ahead and go.
Julia has her hand, Gloria.
Oh, sorry, I don't see her. Where is she?
Yeah, thank you.
Where are you?
Kind of just into regard to
There you
Ananda.
Okay.
Oh, can I go? Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry. Similarly to Ananda and also I think Christina's question, I'm a little worried that right now, kind of the way it's being presented, there may be kind of a mutually exclusive nature to social workers and psychs versus the restorative justice coordinators. Clearly, both are very important, and I just want to make sure that regardless of who's being hired, they definitely have both. And I know that was highlighted in the document, and I really appreciate that. I just want to make sure that, clearly right now, all of our schools have students who need mental health support and don't get it because there aren't enough social workers and there aren't enough psychologists. And we know that having them there would improve student safety and security. And so I'm just hoping and wondering what kind of stuff the restorative justice coordinators would be able to do on a day-to-day basis to address that, and how they're going to interact with teachers and students. And I guess in an ideal world, what their impact would be.
Who would like to answer that question?
Marcus?
Yes, great question, Julia. Appreciate you bringing that into the space. I think one thing we have to acknowledge is that a lot of the mental health issues that our students, particularly our Black and Brown students, deal with are caused by things that actually happen at school. And so shifting the culture, which is what I think a lot of the folks, school-based folks and the RJ, TJ folks who were part of the ad hoc committee were focusing on, was really when we think about safety and security, not just thinking about the emergency situations where we think about law enforcement involvement, but truly thinking about a holistic approach of what safety and security looks like. And if we're addressing that from a holistic approach, making sure our students feel safe at school, emotionally safe, culturally safe at school, a lot of the mental health damage that happens that is school centric, right, that is generated from being at school will decrease. And we may see less of the intensity of need that we might see on a regular basis because of some of the harm that happens because of the white supremacist nature of schooling and education in our society. So that's why I think that's our goal. And that was kind of our focus when we kind of thought about it. That's the lens we were thinking about that through, if that makes sense.
Great, thank you, Marcus. Anthony, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if it was clearly articulated, but I just wanted to to put the thought out there is that Savion was kind of talking about, you know, the restorative justice being that long-term thing, but I've kind of put into the space that I do think there's a need for a position that is focused on kind of what Marcus is talking about, the community climate and the safety of our students, that I think would specifically be utilized to replace what the SROs were in the building. And so I think we talked about a number of positions. I think that's specifically one of the positions that I talked about, because I think the focus that the restorative justice person would have to do is not the same as what it would take to make sure, like you said, our kids are safe within the building. And then those kind of technical things that we have to do in terms of keeping the building secure and all of that stuff, right? That's cool, and that can happen easily. But I think there needs to be a focus on the community climate and the safety of our students, like Marcus said, when they're in the building. I know students who are traumatized and they won't go talk to a social worker, not because that social worker isn't good at their job, not because that counselor isn't good at their job, but because they feel like there's no connection. Now that may be perceived, whether it's perceived or not, it may not be true. You know, that counselor might be great, but that kid is going to engage with people that they feel like they connect with, right? So I had the pleasure of supervising a study hall, you know, for a little while at Memorial. And I had kids coming to me all the time saying, man, you were one of my favorite teachers. Now I knew I wasn't teaching them anything, but it was the space that I was creating. It was the climate that I was creating that allowed them to look at me and say, you made an impact on my life. And I miss that space. And I miss that place where I knew you were, and I knew I could come to you. And so I think as we think about those roles, a lot of people are saying that restorative justice role, which I think is important, but I think the district has been talking about that and saying they've been doing that for a while. So I just want to make sure that I put it out there that I'm thinking about two distinct roles, one that's focusing on community climate and safety that specifically will replace that SRO in terms of being a liaison between people outside of the building, if it's law enforcement, if it's whatever, that helps to keep a proactive relationship and helps to keep kids more than just, you know, safe in terms of locking the door, but what are we doing within the school building to make kids feel safe and feel like they can come and be their best selves while they're at school, which I think are two separate roles. So just wanted to clarify that from my end.
Great, thank you. Any other questions?
Gloria, may I add something to?
Just say, Julia, do you have any additional?
Oh, sorry.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Thank you both. I would love to see those professionals having as much interaction with students as possible, making sure they're not just interacting with teachers or behind the scenes. I think that's really important.
Great, thank you. Great point. Ananda?
Yeah, sorry, I wanted Anthony to have his camera on because he's is being a bit shy about his great experience and background of the restorative justice and working with our youth, providing trainings and support for our young people, addressing a lot of crises in our schools with a restorative justice approach. So thank you so much, Anthony, for all your work and your continued work and your patience to get us or to be with us after waiting for so long. So thank you so much for being here and believing that we could still do it.
Yeah, thank you. You know, it was an honor to serve on this committee with the amazing staff and professionals who gave guidance and expertise in this area. I struggled. I know that they wanted time. I always say this, that we need to move with a sense of urgency. I always say a sense of urgency because I do feel the sense of urgency on this. We had the time during virtual learning, right, to get us together, great minds together to talk about the future of safety for our children in our schools. And so we were allowed that. But I knew that we were going to be opening schools, high schools at some point, and I wanted us to be ready and prepared. I still feel that we have to move with a sense of urgency. I do not, and I say this all the time, I do not want history to repeat itself. I have been around long enough to know that if we do not have the support, the systems in place and the people in place, that we oftentimes revert to the past and how we've done things before. And we really have to make sure that we are ready and prepared when high schools open up. I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but we really have to figure out what it's going to look like so that we don't continue to see officers having to come into our schools to deal with situations that could have been de-escalated, and that it rises to that level of a criminal act. I'm confident with Anthony's leadership, Patrice, Marcus, and others, right, that they will get a handle on this. But our community is watching. We made a bold decision. It was a decision, I thought, entering into this school as a member of the school board, that I would not make. But because of certain situations that have occurred in our country and here locally, that this was a move and a decision that we had to make. And we are going to move forward. But what I don't want to happen is that we continue to utilize police officers to come into our schools if we don't have to, right? And we have to build the capacity and the professionalism within our school district to make that happen. And so I will be leaving the board in March, and I'm going to be watching you all from afar, and I'm going to rely on the expertise and the passion of the board members to make smart decisions, and our school superintendent, Dr. Jenkins, to lead us through this. One of the first questions I asked Dr. Jenkins during the process of his interview is, we're not going to have SROs. What do you think about that? Because that was really important to me. I want us to succeed. And, he answered, he said, we can do it. I've been there. We've done that before in my former experience. And so I'm confident we have a leader, we have board members, and we have the staff to move us forward. But we have to get this right. And so thank you to all who have participated in this. It was an honor to serve with Savion. Savion, you are an excellent facilitator, and you were able to facilitate some really strong and difficult decisions. And so I'm so glad that you're going to continue on this superintendent's advisory council to continue this work, because they really, really need your voice. So anyways, thank you all. If there's nothing else, we're going to close. Savion, do you want to close out with some words before we?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Gloria. It was an honor to serve with you and everyone else on the committee too. It was a really diverse committee, so it was good.
Yep, great. Okay. One thing I do want to add is I do want to suggest that we add the reopening of high schools at some point, and talk about what that looks like as far as safety and security and how we're going to prepare. And so we'll do that in the next couple weeks or so. All right. So let's move on to
Do you have the motion ready?
oh, yeah. I'm trying to bring up board docs. So I move that the Board of Education receive the recommendations from the Safety and Security Ad Hoc Committee and District Administration to provide bi-monthly updates on the status of the policy and budget considerations included in the recommendations.
Second.
Savion, second. Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Show
Julia.
Your advisory vote?
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye. I didn't want you to miss this important vote, Julia.
Yeah, we can't miss the most important vote, Julia. Thank you. Motion passes. Next is reopening schools update. And the format of this is I'm going to have Dr. Jenkins and his staff open us up. And then I have some questions that were sent to either directly to me or the entire board that I will ask of our staff. And then I'll hand it over to individual board members for their questions. Dr. Jenkins?
Okay, first of all, thank you to all the board members too. First of all, that last item that we were working on, I'm very excited to be receiving this up under the superintendent advisory, but I think the recommendations there, I've gone over them, they're very strong, and I'm looking forward to working with our community and working with our schools so that we can create the best environments for all of our students, staff, and community. This is a cultural shift, and this was a big move, so I wanted to just say thank you, first of all, for making that decision to do it. Now to the reopening, I want to say I've been fielding a number of emails, calls, calling people back, just having conversations about that. As we know, this is a big topic across the country, and we've been working steady with our internal, external advisory committee and following the science in every step that we're making. Most recently, if you have not heard, the CDC put out some recommendations on Friday, which followed our announcement on Wednesday. And then there was a letter that I also received from MTI, an open letter to myself and to the board. And we've had an opportunity to have some different conversations. We're going to continue to work with our staff, work with MTI very collaboratively to make sure that this can be a smooth transition. The current conditions based upon the recommendations from our medical advisory, but public health is also saying, and also CDC, it's time for us to begin to lean forward in the most safe way for our students and for our staff. So having said that, I have staff here tonight to answer any questions. I received some questions earlier from a few board members. And so whatever questions you have, please give them to us tonight. We've gone through out and making sure that all staff, we've communicated, and we want to just answer questions. And if there are questions we can't get tonight, we'll get back to you because I don't know how much time we're going to have tonight to go through everything. But there are a lot of things about school reopening that we have pretty much, I think we've covered quite a bit, but you had some different questions and we want to have an opportunity to answer them tonight. So let's just start right there. And if you want to start with your questions, that's great.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for that. So I do want to say we had a really great Facebook Live session. If you were able to see it, Dr. Jenkins and staff were able to answer some really tough questions from our community. And we will continue to have those conversations. And, thank you, Nikki, for asking this be placed on our special meeting agenda for tonight. I think it was really, really important. And so because of her request, we placed it on the agenda. So one of the questions a series of questions that we got, the first one is, we were told that the district is not planning on closing school following spring break, as it has done after Thanksgiving and winter break. Is that the case? I hope that the district continues to close for that period following a break, as students and even staff may travel.
Well, right now, we've learned a lot, first of all, from MSCR, in which we have our program here, which we've been putting together a lot of mitigating strategies. We've learned from that, and coming out of Thanksgiving the last time, that's correct, we did have a short closure there. But now the conditions are changing. What we're continuing to say to everyone, we're going to continue to follow the guidance, follow the science, what it tells us, even though we know that we're going to have people going off. It is not necessarily our intent to close right now, but we don't know what the metric is going to be telling us at that time. If our community spread is getting even worse at that time, then we may make that decision to do that. But right now, as we just learned again today, the numbers are going down below the 5% transmission in our community that we've been seeing. So we'll continue to monitor it. If the numbers are going up, just like we've done with our MSCR, we will make a decision to close it. And in fact, if the numbers are going up, period, in our district in a direction, particularly based upon this new variant that we don't know right now, we're still having individuals predicting where we will go with that. We're going to respond to it appropriately. And I have Nurse Sally and on here now, if you have any other thoughts about that.
I think Nurse Sally, can you, I think this question might, also, this is the next question from Robin Ackley. Is the district strictly adhering to the 6 feet distancing in the classroom when it comes to desks? Or maybe that's a chat question.
No, that's a Nurse Sally question.
Okay. As you know, classrooms are often small spaces, even without all the furniture, and we're concerned that there will not be room to space returning students and place them apart. Is there a specific plan to ensure adequate distancing in classrooms?
Hi, yes, we had a discussion today, and again, we are really sticking to the 6 foot distance guidelines per CDC. So we are believing in those, and we're going to follow those.
Great, thank you. And then the next one is, can you speak to specifics about the updates in ventilation systems in schools? I know we covered it in Facebook Live, but
yes,
ventilation.
Yes, Mr. Weezy will speak to that. He's been talking about that quite a bit in the community at every community conversation we've had.
Thanks, Dr. Jenkins. Yeah, I can almost do this one in my sleep, but I wrote down all my talking points tonight. And hopefully I can make sure that anyone watching and certainly the board can hear them again. So wanted to reiterate that we had MSCR cares and our special education students back in buildings only, shortly, a month or two after we opened, and already had baseline standards in place when those students returned. Over the last year, we've made significant upgrades to our heating system, in particular, the filtration that the school board approved through the consent process. And that was $300,000 in, facility or medical grade filters. I've also done my own research and connected with a number of facility directors, both in the county, spoke with Milwaukee and Green Bay. I am confident the work we've done meets and in many cases exceeds the standards that they have implemented already. I wanted to remind the school board we have in-house steam fitters, HVAC techs, and trained custodians who have implemented this plan. Many school districts don't have the luxury that we do. We've got our own mechanical engineer overseeing all of this work. And we're really fortunate to have them. Again, we've completed that filter upgrade, but also have our custodians have gone through a 50-point checklist at all of our sites to make sure that all the things necessary are in place. Lastly, we've agreed to bring on a third-party engineer. So they will be actually on site tomorrow to start to look at our plan. So we've asked them to audit our plan, go through all of the controls adjustments we've made to bring in more outside air, have extended run times, both when before school starts and after school starts, to empty our building and make sure that the air is as fresh as possible, and go through our plan from beginning to end in terms of what we've implemented. We've also asked them to make site visits to field verify that indeed the filters that our custodians and steam fitters have told us have been installed. And they will do that. They'll be on site tomorrow at half a dozen schools. This report will be ready for the school board and the community prior to March 9th. We have certainly nothing to hide. We're excited about the work we've done. We could not be more excited to bring more staff and students back into our building. I also did want to let the school board know, and certainly the community know, that that this work is, and all the folks I've talked to, is a little outside the box. Other school districts are not bringing in third-party consultants to go through their building. But as I said before, we have nothing to hide. We're quite proud of our work. If we did head in the direction of going above and beyond that third-party audit of our plan, going through our filter purchase, going through our controls, and making spot site visits to verify that the work the custodians, our certified steam fitters, and our mechanical engineer have said we've done. We went beyond that and did a full controls assessment of our entire district, including a balancing report and going through every piece of mechanical equipment. I've also received, an estimate of what that would take. So we're talking about 7,500 to 8,000 hours of professional services from a third party. That would be an estimated cost of about $1.5 or $1.7 million to complete that assessment, and could take months for us to get through. And would certainly be something that I'm not aware of any school district in the nation doing. So I'm happy that we're going to bring on a third party to look at our plan, make sure they go through what we've done, but to do a wall-to-wall assessment of every square foot in our district costs about 25 cents a square foot to do so. And then you have a multiplier in terms of bringing in professional services and compiling a report. Again, in closing, ask everyone coming back to continue to ask, in my opinion, the more critical questions. Do we have PPE available for staff? And just today, Sally and I have been working on the fact that the CDC says it's safer to wear 2 masks. So we've ordered additional medical grade surgical masks that if staff members decide that they'd like to wear a cloth mask in addition to a disposable mask, we'll have that available for staff. You guys have already asked questions about safe distancing, our readiness of isolation space, symptom screener we'll have on board. All things we've continued to hear from our health professionals are far more important than the great work we've done with our heating system. So in closing, we know we're ready, and we're excited to have more students and staff come back to our buildings. Certainly here tonight to answer any other questions if you guys have any.
Great, thank you, Steph. Next question is the lack of any sort of plan for special education students who are unable to mask and distance due to their disability, as well as students with behavioral needs, is very concerning. What are we going to do to support that, support those students?
Okay, Sally, do you want to speak to that? I didn't see John here with us tonight.
Yeah, I'm here.
I think John's
Okay,
there.
there you go. There you go. Kind of speak to it. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'd like to maybe add a little bit more information about that. I actually feel like we do have very specific plans for how to accommodate the different needs of students, particularly those who have some difficulty consistently wearing a mask or wearing it properly. So first of all, I'm going to be sharing a letter with families by the end of the week that will be laying out the expectation that all students, including those with disabilities, our goal is to have all students wearing a mask per our own board policy from January 25th. We know that there are some students who struggle to consistently wear a mask. In fact, if you go to any of our sites right now, we have over 350 students with disabilities currently receiving in-person services, and a fair percentage of those students are not wearing a mask right now. So we have learned a great deal over the last several months about how best to support students and how best to improve the mask wearing capacity of our students. So we are taking a very individualized approach when it comes to determining how best to accommodate student needs, whether it's through different types of masks, whether it's through occupational therapy in terms of the sensory issues that some students may have. And frankly, some students may have more individual time with special education staff. In other words, a different environment, if that's what it takes to provide each student with a high quality education. So we absolutely have plans. And in fact, I have been meeting with principals over the last week to go through each and every one of their questions around how to accommodate this. And I would say that we've already offered very broad guidance, as well as have worked with principals and IEP teams on how best to meet the needs of students with disabilities who are, as I noted earlier, not consistently wearing a mask or wearing it properly. I'll stop there just in case, there are additional questions, follow-ups to that.
Great. Thank you. We may need you after if board members have specific questions.
Okay.
Next is, how is MMSD determining which staff are able to take a leave of absence or have accommodations?
Yes, we're going to have our HR person, Ms. Hargrove, speak to that.
Good evening, board members. I think we've talked a little bit about this before, but obviously for folks that need to have an accommodation based on an underlying medical condition, that is obviously personal health protected information. And so we want for their first connection point to be with HR. So if folks even if they have questions about whether or not they would even qualify for an accommodation, we want them to be reaching out to human resources. And from there, we will support them through the process. But it really is them connecting with their healthcare provider to have that information submitted to the district. And then based on what their healthcare provider is saying, we will work with them on what types of accommodations. And again, we've talked about range of accommodations. It might mean a different type of mask. It might mean a face shield, all the way up to an accommodation that might require somebody to continue working virtually or go out on a leave of absence. So that's sort of the range of accommodations that we're looking at supporting. But we really want for our staff to be connecting with HR first, and we will happily help them through the process.
Great, thank you. Why are all elementary staff being asked to return to buildings when some will not begin in-person instruction for 5 or so weeks after March 1st?
Well, starting off, we are asking all staff to return, but as we said, once we learn from that first week, we're going to be open to having different conversations, but we want to start off with everyone reporting back. And that's also, I set that communication out. That's on me, because we also wanted to know who may be thinking about taking leave at this time. And if we don't ask, we won't know. But there are other things that's going on in the building to get the kindergartners off to a great start. We wanted to do that. And then we will have additional conversation after that first week.
Great, thank you. I understand that asynchronous instruction day will be moved to Monday to enable cleaning staff more time to clean the buildings. I've been told that instructional staff will need to report to the buildings on Mondays. Does it make sense for instructional staff to be in the building at the same time as cleaning staff? Why wouldn't instructional staff work from home on Mondays?
Stanford is going to respond.
Yeah, good evening. Thanks for bringing up this question so that we can provide clarification. So instructional staff will not be required to report on Monday because we will be having deep cleaning happening at that time.
Great, thank you. The CDC recommends school districts hire and train additional substitutes to prepare for absent staff. How many extra substitutes has MMSD trained, hired to prepare for this?
Ms. Hargrove will respond to that.
So we have about 560 plus subs that we've hired and are going through training. So we have our subs that are expected to do the same level of safety training that we're putting all of the rest of the staff through. And they'll be prepared in the same way that the rest of our staff are. So 562 is what's been hired. We're currently working through the process of really connecting with them, understanding what their availability is. As you know, subs are per diem employees, so they get to sort of pick and choose where and when they would like to work. So we're working through that right now with them. And we'll have both sub teachers and sub SEAs as a part of that support team.
Ms. Reyes, I also would like to uplift again. We're doing a phase-in approach, so we won't have like all of our staff back initially for this. So that also is going to play into how we're going to be training the number of staffs and the things that we're going to be able to do, because we're going very much a phased-in approach with the in-person.
Great, thank you. And those were the questions that I received. There were numerous duplicate questions, and so I think I captured most of them. So I'm going to rely on my fellow school board members to ask some additional questions. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ali, who will facilitate the next portion of the conversation. Thanks, Ali.
Nikki?
Yes, thank you. I appreciate Chair Reyes for putting this on the agenda. I think this is a very important topic because I figure the more information, the better in this situation. One of the questions I'm getting quite a bit from, and I'm looking at my phone so I can get the wording right because my memory has too much junk in it right now. But the situation I'm getting a lot of is, how will masks be provided? Will staff be responsible solely for the masks? Will they be N95 masks? That one I've been getting like 20 times a day.
I'm going to have Mr. Weezy also respond to that again here, Nurse Sally.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Jenkins and board member Vandermeulen. I can certainly get that started, and then I think Sally can probably speak to the N95. You know, we've got more than ample PPE available for staff and students, and that includes both disposable 3-ply surgical masks. We've got the plexiglass face shields, and then also have cloth masks available for staff. I feel like we're in very good shape as far as PPE goes. I've been in charge of kind of the purchasing component of that. And we've, you know, Sally and I have been meeting on a weekly basis for the last year to make sure this is in place, and feel like we're in great shape as far as being able to make meet the staff members' needs in terms of PPE. Sally, I don't know if you wanted to speak to the N95 piece in addition to the work we've already done.
Sure. Thank you for the question. It is a common question for myself as well. And I did ask our medical advisor to help us respond to this. I know at our metrics meetings, he did not recommend N95 masks. And then I asked the question again this past Friday. And again, he really recommends, as we were talking about earlier, the 2 masks or the surgical mask, but not the N95 mask. And his reasoning for this is that even in a medical setting, in a COVID-19 unit, they can't get staff to wear them for the whole 8 hour a day. It's really difficult. Staff get acne around the mask. It's hard to breathe through the mask. So the recommendation really is the surgical mask and the cloth mask. So that is really our recommendation, not the N95 mask.
I really appreciate it. I bunch more for actually Sally, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a plan to test staff? Like frequently, or only if symptoms are shown?
Currently, our testing program is with the BINEX antigen testing, and that is for staff who are symptomatic. So, you know, staff who during the day would identify having symptoms, and they could go down to the school nurse and be tested. And you know, we have done that already in some cases. So, and
are there any plans to get a non-symptomatic test?
We are doing that with a research study right now underway by Dr. Wald at Mendota Elementary School. And we're looking to expand that to some other schools. And again, we meet every other week with I will call them our testing consultants. And they have been just our friends in this, and we wouldn't have the Binax antigen testing cards if they hadn't advocated for us. And so we'll continue to work with them and see, their thoughts on if we could move asymptomatic screening, because I do see that is one of the recommendations in the CDC new guidelines.
My next question, and before I have a bunch, but I have one clarification. Please do not take my questions as criticisms. As a practicing Jew, the highest point that we were ever taught was to ask questions. It means you respect the person and you respect their answers. So I respect your work, and I wanted you to know that this isn't criticism. I believe that knowledge should be shared by everyone, for everyone. And I just wanted that to be known. This isn't, I'm trying to put someone on the hot seat. That is not my goal in the slightest.
And not taking that way, thank you so much. We actually appreciate the questions, and any opportunity that we get to answer questions and our public can hear it is better for us. The more we communicate about this, I think the better we're all going to be, okay? So you're perfectly fine. Thank you.
This is an equity question. A lot of our families with kids with disabilities, single parent families, and Black and brown families live in multi-generational households. If a teacher or a staff member does not have a medical condition, but their family member is considered high risk, would they qualify for an accommodation? How would that work?
I'm going to have HR answer that, Ms. Hargrove. But let me just say, going out and speaking to the people in our community, and also in the CDC latest report, they uplifted the impact of African-American and Latinx households. So, and we already know that our students too, special needs, receiving services are impacted in a way. So thanks for that question that just came in. So HR?
Yeah, thanks for that, Nikki. So I think, again, we want for our teaching staff and all of our staff to be checking in with HR specifically. We're going to be working with folks on accommodations. So we're going to take it on a case-by-case basis, Nikki. So we'll want to be sure that folks are reaching out to us. Most of the accommodations are designed to be specific for an individual's underlying health condition. But again, we want to be able to be sure that we're getting that information and that we're able to work directly with the individual to see if there's any way that we can support them. And as long as I have the floor, I just want to talk a little bit about some of the other options as it relates to time off benefit time, if that would help.
That would be
sort of round this out a little bit. So we have what we're calling a FERCA-like leave. So for those folks who do need to stay home and take care of maybe an ill family member, or they've been exposed, or they've tested positive, we have what we're calling FERCA-like leave, which gives folks 10 days of time off to be able to isolate as it relates to that. We also are having what we call COVID closure pay. So if there is a classroom or a program or a school that is closed down for the reasons, whether it's close contact or somebody testing positive, we want to be sure that staff are staying in paid status, right? So if we're closing and something happens and it's not, it's to no fault of their own, we want for them to continue to be paid. So we're also looking at closure pay for staff. And then there's obviously the accommodation process. There's the opportunity to take medical leave. And then obviously folks still have sick time. So there may be a point in time where folks have to use some of their sick time depending on what happens. But what we're trying to do on the front end is really support in various ways and mitigate that as much as possible. So I'll pause there, but I just felt like it was an opportune time to fill in a little bit on the paid time support that the district is providing.
That was super helpful.
I just want to add one other thing, lift one other thing there as we've gone out in our community and talked to the community, be it the parent groups. This whole idea of our demographics in our community has really played out with families sharing with us their difficulties in having the multi-generational households and also the African Americans and Latinx. And so I just want our whole community to hear that when we look at our community, we have to be very sensitive to our students, our staff, and our community. We may not look like the community next door to us, so we have to make decisions what's good for MMSD. We can't make decisions what's good for rural districts or any other small district that doesn't reflect our demographics.
I think that's an excellent point. We're not Middleton. We're not Verona. We're so much larger of a district and a much more diverse district. But one of the questions that we are getting a lot is, we hear a lot of the accommodations that can be done for teachers and students, but we're not hearing a lot about what can be done for special ed assistants, behavioral assistants, janitors or food service, and people who may not have enough sick time other than the light program, because I know you can acquire 1 to 2 sick days a month, but I worry that they might not qualify for some reason or other. So I just want to make sure that they are still included.
Well, yeah, first of all, I'm going to come to just a second, Deidre. I want to uplift and take this time to really say thank you to our first responders, our essential workers across the country. This is a conversation that should have been had because they went right in head first to work, and we didn't have as sensitive conversation as we probably should have. I apologize, first of all, for my end of it. And as we're moving forward, that's something that we really are thinking about, not just myself, as I've been talking to my other colleagues as well. When we're talking about everybody else coming back, I think the community need to realize they've been here, the people you just mentioned, the special needs teachers, the custodians, they've been here, the assistants. So thank you for bringing that up. And HR, if you want to respond.
Yeah, I was just going to say, thanks for that, Dr. Jenkins. I was just going to respond to Nikki and say, obviously, everybody has access to everything that I just shared. And so when we're talking about accommodations specifically for staff, it's not just for our teachers, but it's all inclusive of all of our staff. In addition to the FERCA-like leave that we were talking about, the COVID closure pay that we were talking about as well. So everybody is going to be afforded those benefits equally.
And then I have 2 more questions, 2 more. And I really appreciate all of our data right now is based on the original COVID strain. And as you know, there are 2 or 3 variants. I think there are 3. I may have missed one somewhere. Do we have a contingency plan if our plan suddenly stops working because the contingent is reacting differently?
Well, we do. We've talked about, in fact, when I was working with the APP, the Principals Association, MTI, we all talked about the fact that we need to talk about reopening. But if the numbers go in the other direction, we also need to have a plan to close back down if it gets to that particular point. But what we have learned because of MSCR, like I was saying earlier, and Nurse Sally is here now, and we learned a lot of how to do some of the mitigating strategies. And so, and right now, things, even on one hand, it may be higher than what it was in August. In August, it was a little bit higher, but what we've learned, and based upon the medical advisors, everything you hear from Dr. Fauci and everyone else, the mitigating strategies really make a difference. So Nurse Sally, I don't know if you wanted to add on that.
No, I just agree with you, Dr. Carlton, Dr. Jenkins. The data, it really shows that, if you can really implement the mitigation strategies and do them with fidelity, that you should really be able to have low community transmission in your schools. So
this is my last question. in typical lawyer style, it's a two-part question. Sorry. The first part is we're sending people back before people may have a chance to get vaccinated. What made us make that decision? And the second half is, what do we do about staff who refuse to get vaccinated or refuse to wear a mask?
Well, I'm going to start off and then I'm going to pass off to Nurse Sally and then to Ms. Hargrove. When we were first looking at it, and we'll continue to follow the science, following the Department of Public Health, following CDC guidelines. And when we were talking just like this phased in, we have a dashboard and we continue to look at the dashboard and to look at it and see if it was turning green. Our dashboard continued to move forward, turning green. And based upon even our own local public health, they had said K through 2 could go back. The transmission amongst our youngest children was very low, even though they could be asymptomatic. So we've been thinking about that and looking at their recommendations, CDC recommendation. But as of recent, you have the CDC recommendations that's come out. You also have the National Federation of Teachers come out too, saying that it is possible now to go back if we put those mitigation strategies in place. I will stop right there and have Nurse Sally and then HR to talk about your second part of that question.
Yeah, I think, I know the CDC director has come out, over the weekend and even I think prior to that, saying that, she really believes that teachers can come back to school safely without the immunization. But again, what highlighted how important those mitigation strategies are: face masks, physical distancing, contact tracing is really important. Good hand washing, I think are like the top 4 that really are important. And we, as a district, really do have good experience in doing the contact tracing. We started that this summer, and we've, I'd say this fall, when the numbers were high, we really became pretty expert at it because we had to do it quite often. So I'm very comfortable with our contact tracing and our mitigation strategies. So I think, even though ideally it would be nice to have our staff vaccinated, I think we're ready with, if you think about the layered mitigation strategies, immunization is one of them, but we're very solid in many of the others.
Are we going to require our staff to, when it's available, to be vaccinated? And are we going to require our staff to wear masks?
So Nikki, at this point, we are not looking to require staff. As Sally said, this is one piece of a larger strategy. We don't actually think we're going to have an issue with that. We have most of our staff who are very interested in wanting to go and get the vaccine, but we have to look at it as the full comprehensive mitigation process, right? And our vaccine is just one piece of that larger puzzle. So at this point, we're not looking at it as a requirement, but again, as Dr. Jenkins has said, we're phasing into this process and approach, and we're looking to learn as we move forward. And if there is something that leads us to believe that we might need to change course, then we have to be open to do that.
Yep. And since you're on this particular question, Jay, if you could also speak to where we are with the vaccinations and how we want to try to prioritize.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. Despite the fact that the CDC is now saying that access to vaccination should not be considered a condition for reopening schools, that's not slowing our push to try to find the most efficient way to get all staff vaccinated as soon as possible. Just want to continue to reiterate that at the front of our line are our essential workers, our staff who've been working in person throughout the pandemic, who the State Department of Health Services has not allowed to be in Group 1A. We continue our conversations with a number of local vaccination agencies, and we're trying to put together the best combined approach so that as soon as the state allows us to move on to Tier 1B, we can move our staff in priority groups as quickly as possible through that process. And so our intention is to move just as quickly as we can, following the rules at the state level, and continuing to advocate for shifts in those guidelines, but also making sure that we're ready to go as a district. As Deirdre mentioned, knowing that our staff are seeking vaccination as soon as possible, we want to help them with that.
Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. I'm
Thank you
done,
so
I swear.
much. Thank you so much for your questions, Nikki. I think I saw Board Member Carusi's hand and then Board Member Gomez-Schmidt.
I actually didn't raise my hand yet, so Chris can go ahead.
All right, thank you. I guess I just want to start by saying thank you to every student, parent, staff member, community member who has reached out to share your concerns, thoughts, questions, and even creative problem-solving approaches as we're continuing to discuss the issues of returning to in-person instruction. It's really important, and we are listening, and we are taking everybody's feedback into consideration. Thank you to the staff at central office, our advisory groups, and building level staff. We're working to create a safe environment for students and staff to return. And again, just recognizing that we have had staff working in our buildings. So a special shout out to our MSCR CARES staff and our special education staff and our administrators who have been working in our buildings since last September. I guess my questions tonight focus a little bit on instructional models, plans to bring staff back to schools, sort of elementary and also high school, because as we're talking about elementary because we're bringing the kinders back first, but also taking a look at what we need to be thinking about for middle school and high school too. And just one more comment. I see the evidence is overwhelming, not only of the urgent need to provide an in-person instructional option, but that with proper prevention and mitigation strategies that we can do this safely. And in addition to that, I think we also need to, again, reiterate that this is an option for students and their families. So we need to ensure that we are also working to improve our virtual instruction for the students and families who choose to remain in that virtual model. And I know there's a lot of work going into both sides of that. My question is around first the concurrent instruction model that we're looking at having. I've heard a lot of staff reaching out with concerns about trying to teach both in person and students virtually and how that would look. I jumped onto a kindergarten Zoom this morning just to take a look at what was happening for instruction and see how the reading instruction was working, how the teacher was interacting with students. And so just sort of curious why we chose to go that route and not sort of separate the virtual and the in-person and have the teachers doing a concurrent model where they're teaching both at the same time.
Yes, I'll be happy to have Ms. Stanford speak to that. And thank you for that particular question on the instructional end. We put a lot of time into that, even already talking about the middle and the high school, what would it look like to have a return? And I'm glad you also lifted that we're providing a choice. And we'll talk a little bit later about the app that we're sending out so individuals could make a choice. But at this time, let's just address the instructional piece of concurrent model that you just mentioned, and Ms. Stanford speak to that.
Yes, thank you. So what we wanted to be sure that we were prioritizing with the selection of the concurrent teaching model was the focus on relationships and social emotional well-being for students. So in the concurrent model, teachers will instruct students both in person and virtually during specific times during the day. So I think one of the misconceptions is that with the concurrent model, you will teach all day, both in person and to the virtual students. There are specific times, again, in which that those teachings will occur. So that's during whole group instruction. And so you would have a whole group literacy lesson that you would do with both in-person and virtual students. And then you would have small group and independent work for students then. But there are also many benefits to the concurrent model. Part of that, or a big benefit of that, again, are the relationships. And by keeping classes together with the same teacher, we're able to provide one classroom community, allowing virtual students to participate in real-time learning with their in-person peers, to provide connection and also to build culture. So it also ensures that we are providing equitable instruction by not creating two different student experiences depending on what parents select for their students. There's also some creativity that teachers are having with concurrent instruction as well. So they are creating virtual and in-person buddies at some schools. And so they're being really intentional around pairing students together with a virtual buddy, with an in-person buddy, and they have different times during the day in which they will then check in with each other, right? They might check in right before lunch, or they might check in right before recess or during morning meeting. And so there's a lot of intentional work going on in buildings to be sure that we are doing what we can to support peer relationships during this transition. There have been resources as well. And so TJ and his team have worked really hard to be sure that staff have what they need in order to successfully implement the concurrent model. And so the cameras have already been purchased. They're going out to schools this week. Teachers were able to demo the equipment prior to ordering. We also have teachers that are currently practicing concurrent teaching to familiarize themselves with the new model. In addition, there are video examples being shared. Leaders have visited schools and other districts to observe concurrent teaching, and we have some other opportunities for them to observe in other districts as well this week and next week. So again, I just really want to be clear that with the concurrent teaching model, it is not all day teaching of in-person and virtual, but it happens during specific times during the day.
Yep. And Lisa, you want to add on that about the middle school and the high school, the work we already started?
Hi, sure. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. I would just add to what Carletra talked about. I'm going to stop for one moment and put my mute on.
This can only happen on Zoom where you have to discipline your pet.
So sorry. But yes, quite a human situation we are all living in. I would also add that when we were thinking about the instructional model, that we also thought about the question and the equity tool, who benefits and who is burdened.
Yes.
And we thought explicitly about the students that are taking part in MSCR Cares, knowing that when those students came out of MSCR Cares, that they would need the most instruction possible, because there would be no MSCR Cares when they went face-to-face. So that's why we chose a 4-day model rather than a 2-day AB hybrid model. Because what happens is when the K2 little ones come out of MSCR Cares, they have no daycare left. So families would have had to have chosen between a hybrid 2-day model, if that's what we would have chosen, and no MSCR Cares. So this was the closest that we could get to making sure that we were really thinking about who would have been burdened by a model that was less than 4 days. And we really took a look at the most equitable practices so that those students who were in MSCR Cares could maximize the face-to-face instructional time during the concurrent model. I would say that the concurrent model also, when we were thinking about who benefits and who's burdened, was the model where staff actually had to make the fewest amount of changes. The scopes don't change. The overall schedule does not change. They knew their children. They wouldn't have to switch to an entirely new group of children. They could keep the knowledge and knowing about where those children were at in their learning trajectory, and they could team with their grade level or school colleagues. So all of those were reasons that we thought about that model and thought about which of our stakeholders would benefit or would receive actually unintended burdens.
Right. And I would also add that in my network of about 35 superintendents, there's no perfect model. We're all having to pivot some, and those who've gone through it before us, they talked about the hybrid model versus the concurrent model. And they spoke from their end saying that there were positives and negatives to both. But when I broke down in terms of our whole equity lens and what we were doing, several of my colleagues said, hey, if they're having to continue with this, that they're going to look at that too, so that we can have those relationships with those students who we know who would be losing out the most. They had to change over all of their staff virtual, and the students had to have different teachers for the second part of the year versus continuing those relationships they had already built up.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate those comprehensive answers. I think people needed to hear more about why the model was chosen. And it wasn't so much between the hybrid, because I understand the need for the 4-day. So that completely makes sense. I think it was more the dichotomy of choosing, separating the virtual students from the in-person students. And just to recognize, even though we're going to have a classroom of kids, some in person and some virtual, they're not going to have the same experience because some are going to be virtual and some are going to be in person, and those are going to be completely different experiences. So just to sort of recognize that, and I realize that there's no perfect model, so appreciate just getting information to parents and to staff at how this is going to look and all the complex planning that's really going into place to make this work. So I appreciate that answer.
We look forward to sharing with you an actual schedule of what the experience looks like for in-person children and children that are virtual. Carletta showed us something today, and it thrills me, right, as an elementary principal, to see how that can come to life actually during the day, and how, as Carletta said, you could have a virtual student be a pal with a face-to-face student, and they can chat with each other. They can ask, how are you doing on your assignment? What did you have for breakfast? What's your favorite food? You can build all of those wonderful connections and ways of dialogue in during the day to make sure children are really feeling connected. So we're really excited to share that with you. We think that that's going to be, right, all kids need visuals and mental models for how their day looks, and how it might look for a friend who might actually be in the opposite setting from them. So we're really excited actually about, that's right, true culture building and relationship building in classrooms. So really excited to have that come to life.
Lisa, can you guys mention the videos that we're going to do for the families as well?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. We have TJ McCrae and our communications team also putting together some videos. We actually pulled together a face-to-face, socially distanced classroom and did a mock-up of what that might look like based on the learning that we had seen in other districts and based on working with our own internal people. So we look forward to sharing those with you as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Just to sort of follow up on that, we know that the classroom teachers aren't the only people that we're going to have returning to our schools. When will we have a better idea of how support staff will be utilized to reduce their interaction between classroom pods, and how we're going to have, I've heard some classrooms talking about we're going to have 2 adults in the classroom, and I know there's different, plans at different schools, but when will we have a better idea of that? Is that dependent on the survey coming back from families?
Right, so a lot of that is dependent upon the survey and how many students we will have that are going to select to be in person. But leaders have been given guidance as far as making sure that they are creating pods to support students so that there's not a lot of crossover between who's supporting which classrooms.
Okay, thanks. And then sort of switching to the high school discussion, the high school model is asynchronous right now on Wednesdays. And that, from my understanding, was built around the hybrid model, which is most likely how we would return our high school students to instruction. And so my question is why would we disrupt that model and switch everyone to a Monday asynchronous when kinders go back? when we may need that day in between when we bring the high schoolers back to a hybrid model.
I have one of the high school chiefs, Dr. Pryor, Mr. Hernandez, want to speak to that?
Hi, Chris. That's a great question. We actually met with Sally this morning or this afternoon to talk about this. We're thinking that some of our families will depend on their siblings to be able to provide daycare or to support of the younger ones, to try to line up that as a consistent measure. We checked in with Sally just to ensure about the cleaning, the time that would need, and she assured us that through with Chad that we would have the appropriate time to be able to clean if we were Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. But at this point, we were thinking about the support of being with our elementary littles to be with their siblings that are in kindergarten or in middle and or high.
Mhm. Mhm. Thank you.
My last is more like a comment. I strongly believe that we can safely allow high school students to participate in athletics and co-curricular activities with modified instructional plans in place from the coaches and staff who direct and supervise these activities. Just from what I've been hearing from students, even from staff and from parents, the mental health toll that the continued disconnect and isolation is having on our middle school and high school students may not be visible day to day, but I'm hearing from so many that it's a real issue. And so would just encourage us to really keep working on what's possible for us to do. Even as we're looking to bring high school students back to a hybrid model, what's possible for us to do, because I think bringing them back to co-curricular activities could actually be a really good entryway as they continue their virtual instruction.
Well, that's also a very good question. And I just want to say about our intentionality, just like you heard Mr. Hernandez talk about the vertical planning that we're doing, looking at elementary, middle, and high, having an asynchronous day on the same date. Even with this, but we're looking at CDC's guidance, the most recent guidance. It says the plan for opening of schools first, which we've done that, but we've already begun to have the co-curricular conversations. Mr. Slits has come in, and we've really been talking about that a lot, he and Mr. Hernandez. And so we're going to be inviting students in, inviting coaches in to talk about what could it look like. We're not saying that we're doing anything yet until it is safe to do so. And if you look at the CDC recommendations that just came out, it said to focus on the reopening first, but we are very aware of the social emotional and the mental health well-being of our students during this time. So that's why we're also talking about co-curriculars. It's not just about athletics. It's about giving students an opportunity to connect in safe ways. Co-curriculars, which they are a part of the academic setting for students as well.
Thanks for that answer. I think the new public health order from Dane County also helps to lay out. There's a lot of information in there on what's safe to do for sports and other activities. And so I think that really points to the fact that we can start figuring out what's possible and how to do this going forward. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins and Board Member Gomez-Schmidt. I wanted to ask a few questions and then I'll turn facilitation back over to Board President Reyes, who is able to rejoin us just now. So my first question is, we've talked a lot about safety precautions and mitigating risk within the school. But I would imagine that mitigating the risk and wearing masks and washing hands only works in the school if people are doing it outside of school. There's been a lot of debate statewide about the mask mandate by the governor. In fact, our Senate and our legislature both voted to overturn the mask mandate. If we're talking about sports, we may be talking about communities that have very different relationships to mask mandates or certain precautions around COVID in comparison to our immediate area or Dane County. How do we mitigate the behavior people participate in outside of school within the school's context?
I'm going to have Sally and Jay both talk about this, but from my perspective, as we've been talking as superintendents, we want to be responsible as a school district. That's what we can really control. I think everything coming from public health, coming from CDC, things that's coming from the governor, right? Those ordinances are out there, but we want to be a good partner, good citizens, and model what we're talking about. Even when we're trying to educate and when we do our training in the schools, talking to the students, talking to our staff. But that's what we can maintain. All of this works best when the entire community do just as what you were talking about, practice these safe habits. So we'll do the best that we can to mitigate, as has been recommended at the local level and at the federal level. But that's a very serious thing that the community must take ownership for this. Jay, Asala?
Thank you. I don't know that I have that much to add. It's just we rely on public health, and all of their messaging gets shared with all school districts, and then they ask school districts to help reshare those messages around safe practices at home, safe practices in the community, safe practices when you're going to the grocery store are the same safe practices we're using when we reopen our schools. It's very clear that if as a community, our priority is getting our kids back in schools, everybody plays a role in that, which is what we do in the meantime until we get to that point. It's great to see that the county numbers have dropped and fairly significantly over the past month and a half or so. And much of that, I believe, is because people finally got the message when the numbers climbed so high that it impacted almost everyone in one way, shape, or form through proximity. And so we're just hoping that, as the county begins to shift some of their orders, that we're not at that point yet where we can all just let go and feel like it's just going back to normal routines. We've got to stay vigilant, and we're making significant progress, but Ali, you're absolutely right. We hear the same messaging from our medical partners all the time. They've even gone so far as to suggest that restaurants and bars be closed until our schools can open to continue the control of community spread. And so this is also very much about balancing so many other community pieces in terms of economics and small businesses, but also as somebody with 2 high schoolers trying to find safe ways for our kids to maintain those social connections, with activities outside in the winter is not necessarily easy, but it's about trying to find the balance of all those things, but everybody hopefully doing their part so that we can expedite the process of reopening.
And I'll just say, I think we need to continue to work with our students and families, especially with our families in MMSD, to educate them about the importance of wearing masks and work with them if they need masks and getting resources to them so that everybody understands that it is important, and we can work with them if they don't have the accessibility to get masks. So I think we have a piece of education to do with our families who are in our community.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily speaking to Sally, folks who struggle to get a mask, but more so folks who have a hard time taking the pandemic seriously, which we've seen be a widespread phenomena throughout the nation and the state, and be reinforced by very powerful aspects of our state government. Although I greatly appreciate your answers to the question, I think some of your answers reiterate a lot of folks' concerns, right? Because we're not necessarily talking about shutting down bars or shutting down other local businesses in order to reopen schools more safely. We are talking about simultaneously, having those spaces open. The other question I've thought about a lot is how are we ensuring that we're creating spaces that are developmentally appropriate in terms of what a kindergartner's experience will be like if a large part of the focus is the safety precautions versus learning, or if that is something that comes up over and over again throughout the day. I think it's normal for small kids to move into each other's space, normal for young kids to fidget or to move their mask off of their nose for a little bit. So how are we making sure that these expectations are developmentally appropriate and are reinforced in developmentally appropriate ways versus punishing kids to struggle with the adjustment to the social distancing requirements we're going to be asking of our littlest learners.
One of the things I'll say, and then we could definitely have Nurse Sally speak about it because of MSCR, what's been going on. But as I'm talking to my colleagues who've gone back, they said to be really, really, really careful with the adults because we haven't seen one another and we want to congregate. And so make sure that we're keeping 6 feet, apart and all those things like that. But with our youngest ones, and you mentioned punishment, I'm truly believing the training that we're going to do, the conversation is not going to be about punishment for our youngest learners. And we've actually seen in MSCR, and Nurse Sally can speak to that too, how we have to work with students. We're reculturing right now, all of us. So if you want to speak to that, Nurse Sally.
Yes, through MSCR, we've really learned that probably the most important person in all of this is the teacher, and that they being a good role model and doing the distancing and wearing masks and doing it in a joyful way and not in a way where you punish a student for not doing it. And I think in those classrooms and MSCR where this happened, we had 100% of students participating and wearing masks and had very little difficulty. I think it was in those schools or programs or classrooms where sometimes teachers struggled. And so, and I know that in our department, we're doing some really good work with social emotional health and development and talking about what is needed to help kids wear masks, social distance, so that teachers will have resources around that as well.
Thank you so much for speaking to those questions. I think this is one of the more important conversations we'll ever engage in terms of us as a board navigating something this serious. I think the stakes are incredibly high. I think people's lives and safety are at risk. And I think some of the reaction we've heard from the community and some of the fear around this really requires for us to be as transparent and as thorough and as open and flexible as possible. Dr. Jenkins, I've heard you talk about the indicators for us needing to close or us needing to scale back or us needing to change course. I'm hoping that you can identify what would signal to us that this wasn't the right move, that we need to pause or take more time or reconsider our approach. The other part of that question is we've seen folks protest and strike around the country in larger communities and progressive communities when asked to return to in-person learning, particularly before teachers have had access to the vaccine. If this becomes an issue of labor in terms of the conditions of people's work, what is our plan to address that, and how do we be as collaborative as possible and also acknowledge that people's concerns are genuine and are related to their safety and the safety of the people that they love?
Well, this is what I say in the beginning. The reason that we continue to go virtual, we said it was all about safety, following the science. We're going to continue to follow the science. I've talked to my colleagues around the country. Some of them have had the teachers to go on strike. We've been very collaborative. Every Friday, I meet with MTI. Every Thursday, I meet with the Principals Association. We're working collaboratively. Now, there will be sometimes some decisions that we make. It comes a point, sometimes you just make a decision, even during collaboration, that you have to make to move forward. But following the science, we wouldn't make a decision that's not in concert with the science. More have changed now than what it was in August, what it was in November, what it was in January. The metrics that we set forth, that we said that we were going to use to guide us, even though CDC just came out with their recommendations and the teachers gave a thumbs up saying that it was okay to return back without even having the vaccinations. Vaccinations are just one part of it. But as we're having our conversation, just like these conversations, it really helps us to have everyone be on the same page about what it is that we're trying to do. I totally understand, and we understand the anxieties that individuals have. But our goal is to help to continue to educate on the metrics that we've set for following public health, following CDC. CDC guidelines that just came out clearly says it's time for us to begin to gradually return to opening schools if the mitigation strategies are there. And you heard from Chad earlier, you've heard from Nurse Sally and all of the other individuals that we're being very intentional. We're doing the MMSD way of being very intentional, slowing it down, not getting ahead of it, because we're concerned about the safety, the health and safety of our students, staff, and our families. We have different demographics. We have to do all of this. We're also hearing from families who wanted to open up based upon the science. We're hearing from families based upon the science because let's face it, there's conflicts out there on some of the science. But we realize what's going on the federal level, state level, all of those things. We have to take that into account, but we're going to be intentional to ensure the safety of the people in our community. Our metrics, if they change, there's a second variant that's out there that is predicted. It could move faster. It could change our metrics. As we see that happening, our medical advisory team, our internal, external team, then we'll pivot and go in a different direction. We will never allow the safety of our students and of our staff and not being good community partners be in jeopardy. And that's where we're coming from. Will we ever be at 100% for anything? I can't guarantee you that. I'm not a medical doctor, but I'm taking from, along with our team, the science from the medical doctors. And then logistically, that's what you heard here tonight. We're trying to put it back together for everyone the best we can, but we won't have a perfect model. So that's what I would say. We are prepared to move forward as long as the data is trending in a direction that says it is safe to reopen. But the moment it looks as if though we need to take a pause, we will take a pause and we will pivot. But I also didn't lift up our co-curricular activities. Beyond just that, we're already trying to see how can we safely do graduation. You remember last year how awful it was for everybody graduating class of 2020, but we're looking as a team, how can you safely have graduation? It may not be in one day because we're in the middle of a pandemic still, right? So it may be over 4 days or 5 days, I don't know. But we're going to continue to try to look for ways that we could lean forward, March 9th being the day that we're looking for everyone to have it on their calendars for us to begin to return and welcome that kindergarten class of 21 back to our schools. So I hope that answered your question. If it didn't, please ask your question.
I think that there's a desire to have a more kind of specific indicator, meaning if we see, an increase of COVID at this level, if we start to see ourselves exit what currently allows for us to be safe, this is what it would look like. I think having kind of some of the data that describes what makes this, because I think the idea of minimizing risk is one thing. I also think the metrics that when we closed schools last year in March,
right.
No one had died of COVID-19 in Wisconsin at that time, right? So we're obviously not using the metrics to remain closed that we used to shut down in the first place.
Right.
And I think looking to what are the metrics in their specific nature that allow for us to move forward with this plan right now, and that would tell us that we need to change course. I think are those indicators are important to name.
Right, and we're going to put those in our dashboard, and just like you've heard some of even coming from public health in terms of why would they increase in the number of people we allow to be out based on the spread in our community. If the spread is really low, then we're in great shape. If the spread begins to increase and put us in a situation that's not healthy, then we'll look at that. Those things are on our dashboard right now, and the dashboard itself may change as we gain more information as we move forward. So that was me speaking. I'll have Nurse Sally if you want to speak to that as well. Based upon our medical advisors and that internal, external committee, that's what we're looking at, and we'll recalibrate on that and put those out there publicly for everyone.
Thanks, Ollie, for the question. But yes, I agree with Dr. Jenkins is that, we will bring this back to our medical advisors and kind of recalibrate and relook now also that there's new CDC guidance that has come out that's, I think, much clearer than has been in the past. So we'll look at that guidance, talk with public health, discuss with our medical advisors, and relook at that dashboard and see what everyone advises would be the best next steps.
Thank you so much for speaking to that, Sally and Dr. Jenkins. And I do think as we consider, moving forward and bringing students back in person and educators back in person, it isn't lost to me that we're having this current meeting on Zoom, and what it looks like for us to continue our work in person, and to shift our way of doing things as a board right along with educators. With that being said, board president Reyes, do you want to begin facilitating?
Thank you, Ali, for those questions. We are going to start meeting in person in March. So looking forward to that, where we can all be in the same space. We're planning the details with Barb right now on those logistics. Chris?
Thanks, Gloria. I want to start by expressing my sincere gratitude for this conversation. This is really helpful, and I think we're giving community information that they want to hear. Gloria, I really appreciate that you pulled questions out of the email that we've received and started us off by answering those questions from the public. I think that was really important. Many of the questions that I had have already been answered, so I'll focus on a few that haven't. I want to start out with the metrics. Ali and Chris, I appreciate your questions about those. I dug into the CDC guidance this weekend, and the CDC metrics, as Sally has alluded to, don't align with the Public Health Madison-Dane County metrics that we're currently using. I'm glad to hear that we're evaluating our metrics to keep current. I also noticed that in the CDC guidance, they, similar to us, they're looking at percent positive tests, and they're looking at total number of cases per 100,000 people over a 7-day period. And if you look at similar metrics from Public Health Madison-Dane County, our total caseload in Madison is trending downward, but still very high, and our percent positive tests are very low. The CDC recommends taking your highest metric of those two. Like if one is high and one is low, you look at the high one. So I think we do need to take the CDC guidance in that regard. And if we, probably what our low percent positive test means is that we're doing a really good job in our community of testing people. I know that the percentage of positive tests goes up like 2% if you take out UW, because UW is testing all their employees and students right now. But if you look at overall cases in Dane County, both the Public Health Madison-Dane County data and the Wisconsin Department of Health data, we're still high. We've moved from very high to high, which means that our trajectory of disease is going in the right direction. There hasn't been much change in the past 2 weeks. Statistically, I think both agencies said it's been pretty steady. So we do have a lot of cases in the community, and there are studies that show that mitigation strategies in schools are very effective when caseloads are low, and they're less effective when caseloads are high. And I'm saying all this because I think we actually need to be very intentional and thoughtful about those metrics for when we decide we need to go back to virtual to keep everybody safe. I think, it's one thing to say we're going to do it, and it's another thing, I think, to be really thoughtful about like what those metrics are. Does it just mean that the numbers start trending up again? Are we actually going to like look at the CDC numbers, which, I'm not really sure if we're in the red zone or the orange zone for the CDC right now, but if we were to move from orange to red or yellow to orange, would that shut us down? I think that's important for parents to hear as they make the decision to send their kids back. I think they're going to want to know that we have a plan in place to keep their kids safe if things get to the point where we have to like move back to virtual. I'm wondering if folks can speak to that. I have more questions too, but.
Well, I'll start off. I think those things and pretty much what Ali was just saying as well, that's what we want to do, is be specific about what would cause us to go back. And we've had those conversations. In fact, in my conversations with just members of the advisory team. We said to open and then be ready to pivot if we have to get to that point. But we would lay those things out to the community, to our staff, to everyone, in terms of what would be the positives. But when again, I'll point you directly back to CDC in terms of where we are right now. We're higher actually in Dane County than what we would be on CDC's measurements in terms of being moderate. I think it was when I recently looked at it. You can see it. I just shared it out with you guys this weekend, so you can see kind of where we fall in that zone. Nurse Sally, anything else on that?
No, you're right. We're right. So we're right. We're kind of in that orangish zone. So we need to be watchful and agree. We need to just come up with some guidance about when it would be unsafe to come back into our buildings. Many of our medical advisors still, they strongly recommend us coming back at this time with the data that we have. So, and then also just thinking about our students and their needs overall, especially their social emotional needs.
Now, I do appreciate the need to look at the whole student when we're making these decisions. So thanks for bringing that up. Another question I have is about the survey that is going out to parents. And, I'm hoping this meeting will help folks, but I'm concerned that parents may not have all of the information they need to be able to fill out that survey regarding their intention to return. I'm wondering if you can give us more specifics about when that survey might go out and when it might be due. If families will be able to watch the videos that you're making and see the schedules before the due date. Will parents know if their child's teacher is going to come back and teach in person, or if their child's classroom is going to have a sub or another teacher because their teacher can't come back? And is there a place in the survey for parents to say, I can't answer right now, I need more information, or is this really going to be a yes or no, I'm going back or I'm not going back type of survey? I'm concerned that we're going to be asking parents to make choices without enough information. And we did get some very interesting and good questions about 4K in particular today, where there's concern that we're going to be asking parents to make decisions about sending their children back to 4K without actually knowing which 2 days of the week their children would attend. And there's parent work and scheduling concerns that could be thrown off by not knowing that. So I'm wondering if you could speak more to the dates for the survey, how much more information parents will have, and if there will be a way for parents to say, I can't answer this until I have more information if they don't have enough.
Yeah, I'm going to have Dr. McGregory speak about the survey, and then we can get into the 4K piece where Lisa or Ms. Stanford, one of the two, could speak to that as well.
Yeah, we're working with the elementary chiefs who ultimately will be supporting the principals regarding the survey in terms of to give the definitive date this week that it will go out, but it is expected that it will go out this week. The survey is more of an intention to return survey. So the survey will is not planned to have as detailed information as what you're saying, because the intention is, yes, we plan to come back in person, or no, we don't. And the survey then will trigger certain things such as access to transportation. It is anticipated that if someone is in the model where they're going to be in person, they can easily transition out of that model, but it's harder to transition from virtual to in-person because we had that lead time with transportation.
And your second part was about what would 4K look like? Is that correct? So
yes, that, and also will parents have more information about their classroom teachers' intention to return before they commit to returning?
And Ms. Stanford will speak to that, and then we'll have HR in terms of speaking to the other part, because it may be some other things where we may not know that right away. Go ahead.
Right. So I can speak to 4K. And so 4K, as we know, is going to be a full day model, 2 days a week. So parents will have the option of a Tuesday, Wednesday cohort or a Thursday, Friday cohort. And right now, the way that the question is worded is they will get to select their preference with the understanding that we are going to do our best to support their first preference, but depending upon how many students select to return in person, we may not be able to support all of everyone's first preference. But they are being asked which one would they prefer to have, either a Tuesday, Wednesday, or a Thursday, Friday.
And then Ms. Hargrove, in terms of the returning of the staff?
So yeah, thanks for that, Chris. Yeah, so as I shared before, we're going to be working really closely to work on any leave options or time off options that staff are requesting and are approved. And so we're working very closely with our chiefs and our principals as that information is coming in and it's getting processed, and we have definitive information that will be sharing that information and then working with our principals to staff those vacancies as quickly as possible.
On a related note about staffing, I think it's really important that we treat our staff with compassion during this pandemic and understand the stress that they're under. I know that we're making accommodations for staff who personally have health issues that might put them at risk if they go back into the classroom. We have heard from staff who are caregivers to people who might be at high risk of complications or death from COVID if they get it. You know, their partner is at risk, their child is at risk, they're caring for an elderly parent who is at risk. And they are telling us at least that they are having to make the decision to either go back and put their family member at risk or take unpaid leave and possibly lose their benefits. Is that correct? Are we actually putting staff members who care for people who are at risk of complications or dying of COVID in a position of having to choose between possibly exposing that person or taking leave without pay and possibly without benefits? I mean, if they don't have sick leave.
Right. So just to clarify, we have an other leave option, which is an option that would be an unpaid leave. What I think is really critically important for the board to understand is the level of complexity that we're working through right now, right? We want to support and provide as many options for folks to get the support that they need and balance returning and reopening schools, right? So again, we're asking staff to reach out to HR and start the process there so that we can specifically understand what request it is that they're asking, and then we will work through that process with them going forward. But you know, in the interest of full disclosure and transparency, there may be many folks that are looking to have various accommodations or various options as it relates to all of those examples that you shared, Chris. And so we just have to be able to step through each one of those and be able to support and make the decisions that we need to make as a district. But there is an other leave option that we have as part of our portfolio of options, which is an unpaid leave. So that may be where folks may be getting that information, because that's what we have available. But again, we have to be able to take this on a case by case and step through this one at a time. And we're balancing the complexity of being able to fully staff our buildings for this phase in reopening, which I think, again, it's really important. As Dr. Jenkins already mentioned, we're taking this one step at a time, right? Our kinders, and we're going to learn about that phase in process to help us understand how it is that we'll be moving forward for those other grades that are phasing in.
Yeah, let me just lift one thing Ali said. This is really the most difficult conversation and actions that we're taking right now for all of us, because it is a matter of life and death, frankly. And that's real. It's not maybe, it is real. I go back again and I apologize to our essential workers, not just ours here across the country, because we didn't have this level of conversation about them. And some of them are taking care of their family members as well. And we said to the custodians, nope, you got to come back to work. We said to the special ed team, nope, you got to come back to work. As a country, that was wrong. So when we go to do the vaccinations, we've got to prioritize the individuals who went in and stayed in without the vaccination. We've got to put them up front. We've got to commit to that, all of us together, and say, hey, this who must go in first. And those kindergarten teachers going back, we must prioritize that. I said that to say we have learned, and Chris, I tell you, because you said you hope that we are, every decision we're making, we're being so intentional, and this is about human life. There's nothing political about this, and there's nothing fancy about it. This is trying to make sure we do our very best. That's to everybody. What other individuals, as well as our own lives, are at stake here. And yes, we did have a student to pass in our district, Asai. And when I talked to his mom, she said, make sure that you let everybody know. We were talking about her kid. It was real. It is real. And Ali, you brought up earlier that some people are not taking it serious. This is serious to us. We're not just trying, and it's serious to be in school, it's serious being out of school, the social, emotional, and mental health piece. This is very serious. I just thought I just needed to lift that. I appreciate all the questions, I really do. But I want everybody to know that we are taking this very serious by every decision we make. And we're going to continue to follow the science into whatever decision we have to make. Thank you.
I really appreciate that, Dr. Jenkins. The level of anxiety and stress and even depression I'm hearing from staff members who are having to make really challenging decisions is intense. And the more we have to be compassionate to that, we have to accommodate people and take this on a case-by-case basis and make sure everybody's safe. Couple more questions. First of all, if vaccination for Group 1B is delayed past March 1st, are we changing our timeline?
No, we're not changing our timeline. What I think CDC said clearly, the teachers union nationally said, we need to make it a priority. I really can't say if Doug Rasmussen is a parent or not. He wrote all of us, and he sent a communication to the governor, the lieutenant governor. We all need to get together, work together to make sure that we get the vaccinations for our staff as soon as possible, just like CDC recommended. We want the vaccinations right now. It may mean something different for everybody, like we say, individual cases, right? But that's why we're saying we're not going to rush and go all the way. We're starting where they say we can mitigate at the lowest level based upon what the science is telling us in terms of the transmissions. Some people are saying, hey, you need to go right back right now with full schools all day, every day. I hear that. But I'm also saying we're being intentional about the safety and we're sticking to what we said we were going to do. It may delay expanding the grade levels, but we're going very slow, being very deliberate to ensure the safety of everyone. And we also at the same time having to work to refine what we're doing with virtual learning and the personal connections we have to make. That's where we are with it right now, but March 9th is intended, and I look forward to working with the Principals Association, working with MTI and everybody to do the best thing in the interest of our students in our community.
Thanks. I'm really appreciative that we have a third-party engineer coming in to look at our HVAC plans. Thank you so much for that work. I'm also wondering if the board can get, as we reopen buildings, can we get confirmation that every building that reopens has all of its sinks working and hot water in all of those sinks?
Well, you probably won't have hot water. Well, let me say, we're doing the best we can to get them all there. But the hot water, I know that has come to me too on several occasions. It's not the hot water. And Nurse Sally and I talked about it. And actually, Nikki and I talked about it. It's the length of time and how you go about washing your hands. It's not necessarily the hot water. Chad Weezy, he probably want to speak to this too as well. When buildings have been shut down, we're flushing, we're doing all those things, and sometimes it take a lot longer. And some buildings, I don't know, they had hot water. So Chad, you want to speak to that piece of it?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Jenkins. So Chris, all of our buildings are set up to have running hot water. And we've been at this now for almost a year and continue to, as we test sinks, find sinks that fail and we fix them as quickly as we can. So we currently have 2 buildings, a middle school and a high school, that have issues with their hot water heater. And we're fixing those right now. And it's not if, it's when we return to school, we'll have sinks that don't work. We have thousands and thousands of sinks around our school district. And when they go down, we will fix them as quickly as we can. I think it's good for the community and board members to know that we're required by code to only have, 1 sink per 50 occupants in our schools, and we far exceed code requirements for that. And there will certainly be times with older facilities that we're going to have to fix fixtures that go down. So we're testing them and fixing them as quickly as we can. To Dr. Jenkins' point on the hot water, I think a few things come up there as we're doing our building walkthroughs. Hot water needs to be circulating through the buildings to get from the domestic hot water tank to the far reaches of the building. And there'll be times that you press that hot water button, it might be a couple minutes before it comes when the building's unoccupied. And when the school's occupied, there's a better likelihood that you'd have hot water. I guess the last piece is, to Dr. Jenkins' point, what's the important piece of actually washing your hands is the amount of time that your hands have water and soap on them, not warm water and soap. And we know we'll have, we will have plenty of running water to make sure staff and students are safe.
Yeah.
I would just interject though that cold water right now is really, really cold. And if we're going to get kids to keep their hands under that water, it's going to have to be fun.
Chris, I'm going to have to agree with you. Even when I wash my hands, I would love to have warm water though. I wouldn't say that.
And Dr. Jenkins, that is the goal. So we'll continue to stay at it. I'm in the same boat. Nobody wants 40-degree water, especially when it's cold outside. That's the one time of the day maybe you can warm up a little bit.
Right.
Yeah, we'll continue to make sure we're doing everything we can.
Thank you. Thank you. Am I breaking up?
Thanks so much.
Echo.
Am I breaking up when I speak?
There's an
I
echo.
think somebody might have their YouTube on, and that might be creating feedback.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So if everybody can mute. Next, Savion or Ananda, do you guys have anything?
Yeah, I've got a few questions. First of all, thank you to Dr. Jenkins, the administrative team, our school staff and teachers who've gone above and beyond during this whole pandemic. Our nation as a whole has not put public education in a good spot. And, as a whole, public education is in a very vulnerable position, and we're not operating from a place of optimality. Between Dr. Jenkins and our teams, who are collaborators with MTI or Dane County Madison Public Health, I think we've all led with integrity and honesty and thoughtfulness and transparency regarding this decision. It's probably the most challenging decision that we'll have to make, that public schools will have to make of our generation. This conversation we're having is a testament to our transparency and a testament to our willingness to answer all the questions and concerns that our communities rightfully have. So I just wanted to get that off the bat. In terms of the survey and folks' intention to return, we had our survey in January where district-wide it was around 40% or so, 30 to 45% willing to go back. How are we going? But that may look different on a school by school basis. One school might only have 30% go back. One might have 60% go back. How are we managing that and maintaining social distancing? Is this an opportunity to look at mixed stage classrooms or outdoor classrooms? So that's one question. And then can someone confirm for me the epidemiology of spread in schools, especially with our experience with MSCR cares? Is the virus being spread within schools, or are people getting the virus out in the community, and because of the regular testing we have in our schools, we catch it and then we're nimble enough to close and pivot MSCR care site? Will that, what have we learned from that, and can we apply that to this phased in reopening? Very narrow. And so those are a few of the questions I have off the bat.
Let's start with the spread from the outside coming inside. I'll have Nurse Sally speak to that because, right, we've learned a lot from MSCR with that as well.
We have learned a lot about that spread, especially when we've done our contact tracing. And that involves when we are notified of a student or staff member who's positive. And, this fall, when our numbers were quite high in the community, we did have a number of staff members, especially, bring, they ended up being COVID positive. And so with those situations, we did contact trace, and, especially because of it was a childcare setting, many times we quarantined the whole classroom. And so I think that's, a key is really, when is to really do good contact tracing, making sure that you quarantine and isolate and, separate individuals from coming down with COVID-19. And we had very little spread. I don't think we, in our buildings at that time, we really looked at our data very closely and we also looked at our special education data, and there was very little spread, if any, that we saw in any of our school buildings. So I don't know if that.
Well, and just to be clear, when we caught a case in MSCR cares, we closed down immediately, right?
Absolutely. So when our team, just to kind of give you an example of what happens, let's say, in the afternoon, a case would get identified. The nurse would notify the lead nurses, and then, we started contact tracing, and then our team of, I'll say, COVID leaders would get together, and then we'd make decisions about closing the classroom and at times closing the program, just depending upon the spread. And, I'd say sometimes we close programs more because of lack of staffing than we did of anything else. So, but there was a lot of work done, within the buildings and within our teams to really create a safe environment for our schools. And you're right, we had to react quickly. And sometimes we were doing this at 10 o'clock at night and sometimes at 6 in the morning. So we were always, and very, very good nurses and others helping us do this work. And I feel confident about the work that we did do.
Thank you.
Can we go to your prior two questions? Could you restate that for me?
Yeah, in terms of looking at the level of demand we'll have, starting with the kindergarten return, are we still expecting what we saw in the January district survey? And then, depending on schools having to get creative, are we looking at mixed stage and outdoor classrooms?
Right. Well, right now, this week, I don't think we want to do outdoor classrooms, okay? But later on, Maybe we could,
March
right?
and April.
Okay, thank you. Because we have talked about outdoor classrooms, but already we had one school indicate that they were going to have, Lisa, was it 85% back? Thinking they would come back because we have the principals talking. So I'll have, Lisa, if you would, and Collector be so kind to speak to that.
Sure, happy to. That's a very good question, Savion. Thank you for that. As you know, we're having our principals and teachers connect with families. We know that outreach certainly will yield us better results than a rather dry survey from central office. So they certainly have the relationships with families and students, so are very happy that they're reaching out. I know that the chiefs, as well as Karen Kepler and her team and Deirdre and her team, have been doing building walkthroughs, and schools are actually planning for the spaces and places that they will need to use to accommodate whatever numbers of students come back, including, really helping teachers to clear spaces so there's more room, to clear stuff out to the side and create storage areas. So what we do know is that teachers may not be teaching in the classroom that they were in last year, and children may not be in those spaces, but we want to make sure that our spaces are as welcoming as possible so that we can keep children in their home schools. Carletra, is there anything that you would add to that, or Karen?
I think you hit it all. So, Savion, I think one of the main things is that we're thinking about spaces differently this year, right? So dependent upon, again, how many students select to return in person, we're going to look for those spaces where they can be within the building. So prior, we might have had like a wing of just first grade classrooms or a wing of second grade classrooms. Now what we're doing is we're really being intentional around, if we have the majority of our first graders returning, where are the largest spaces in the building that those students can be located? Again, with the idea that we want to be sure that we can keep students in their home schools.
Hey, Lisa and Carletra, thank you. I'll just add one other key piece on our building walkthroughs. Principals and their reopening team are doing amazing work, being very creative with the space. What they're finding also is the creativity of also creating space for staff so that they can focus on the health and wellness, so that they get break and also some space to eat. So rather than a staff lounge, they're really trying to think through these kind of mobile spaces where staff can then have smaller groups or schedules that they necessarily wouldn't all fit into the staff lounge. So I really also appreciate the leaders in the reopening team looking at creative space for staff so that there's kind of the health and wellness part of that planning as well.
You're on mute.
I think one of the things about the reopening that I would like to lift at this point, we've asked the principals and the building reps to work together. The reentry team, so this is not like we're at central office just saying, go do this, or the principals are saying, we're going to do this. They have a reentry team, which everyone's getting the voices. And we've had some schools report out, and it's just amazing some of the, excuse me tonight, my throat. But it's just amazing when you hear some of them with the energy and when you see the teams working together. I'm talking about from the custodian to the administrative assistant to the principal and the teachers working with them, and how creative they've gotten in the way that they've worked with MSCR's staff as well. I just had to lift that. That's been beautiful.
Got it. My last two questions are, what are we doing to be proactive about supporting mental health in this time? This is something we talked about back in January in terms of what it will take for students to recover from this prolonged period of isolation and quarantine. Adults too, what are we doing to be proactive about that? And then my last question is more of a call to action. Well, I'll let folks answer that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, let me say Jay has been all over it, even requesting additional counselors. And I think I can't remember which one of the Chris's said something about the mental health, a psychologist too. And as we're thinking about this for the adults, I'm talking about your last comment there, Savion. And we've really been thinking about this. We've already put it in the budget for, I think it was like up to 6. Jay, I haven't speak to that, but I think it was like 6 you requested additional counselors. Is that correct, Jay?
Correct.
Yeah, and you can go ahead and speak about that work then that we're looking to do with that, not only with the students, but the adults.
Yeah, Savion, thanks for raising this up. I think recognizing that it all starts with teachers, and Carletra spoke earlier about doing everything we can to maintain those connections between teachers and their students, and within classroom communities, and making sure that our staff have resources to help transition that community to in-person, and then a community that will likely be split with some students remaining virtual. But we know that social emotional support for our students begins by taking care of our teachers. We know that our teachers are anxious about returning. We know that they need time to process themselves. They need support to sort of rebuild those connections with colleagues. They also need individual support, quite honestly. And as we support our teachers, that involves making sure that they have the resources that they need in their classrooms. That involves making sure that they understand the critical nature of balancing social emotional learning with academic learning, and recognizing that in many cases, helping students manage their emotions is directly connected to their academic growth. Making sure that there are times set aside within the elementary schedule that Carletra also mentioned earlier, so that we know that social emotional learning is carried throughout the day. I want to also point out that our teachers do so much, but they can't do it all. And when our teachers are aware that students need something additional, they hand it off to their support colleagues, and their support colleagues at the elementary level, the social workers, the psychologists working closely with the nurses, PBIS coaches, have strong tier 2 and tier 3 mental health supports at the ready, whether it's working in small groups or individualized supports. We trained all of our support staff in December in mental health navigation, making sure that they're well aware of all of our resources and how to do those referrals for those tier 3 mental health supports, continuing our partnerships for providing those additional mental health therapies. I feel really strongly that we're set up to manage the social, emotional, and mental health needs as they return. But I also think it's really important to recognize that so much of reopening is because we know that many of them, that's what they need the most. And being together in person with their teachers and with their peers, in many cases, is what we think they are looking for.
Yep, and I also like to let, and Julia, thank you too. She brings it up in every conversation when I'm meeting with her and the students. It's not just Julia, but she'll tell you her peers, they're bringing this whole mental health piece up. And I think what we've done thus far, that's good for now, but we're going to be in this for a while. So we're going to have to continue to look at how we're strategically bringing aboard social workers, psychologists, counselors. The student services never before been needed like it's needed right now, not just for students, but for the adults too. So we're going to have to figure out what we do specifically for our staff and their mental health needs to add to what we're doing right now. And I must say too, some of that came from MTI. As I'm learning from them, we were just collaborating on some things. Some of the thoughts of mental health, MTI has brought that up, but some teachers have also written and they've come with solutions, recommendations to it. And I really do appreciate that piece.
Thank you. Yeah, and my last comment is, we made this announcement on Tuesday. The following day, the federal administration announced they bought 200 million vaccine doses. Was also announced that the federal government will start delivering those vaccine doses to local community centers, bypassing some of the state government red tape. Earlier this year, I believe, we sent a letter to DHS, the governor, and the feds asking, hey, let's speed this thing up. I think we need to look at doing another one. Let's get rid of the red tape. Let's do this. Let's get these vaccines out, especially by March 1. We have a school in our own community, one city, that's been a national model for testing. They've been open. And I think we can replicate that success here. And especially, once we get this vaccine out in March, with what's anticipated by March 1. Yeah.
And I would also like to say that Mr. Kerr, has been very open. We've been having conversation about some of their mitigation strategies, and they have been recognized on a national level for a study that was going on, that they were a part of it. So we have a lot of people in this community really are trying to help. We have a wonderful medical advisory. So thank you. And sometimes I think we forget to just say thank you to people who are really, really trying to help us. Some people outside of our own medical advisory team, they have also communicated, and some parents have done their research and shared it. So thank you to all of you as well.
Great, thank you, Savion, for your questions. Ananda?
Yeah, thank you so much, President Reyes, for facilitating this conversations. And thank you so much, Ali, for also helping us navigate through this conversation. I want to start out by just feeling really grateful when Sally was mentioning that people were working until late to 10 o'clock. And then from 10 to 6 having to be, the other roles that they play in the community or in their lives or with their family members, being parents, being children, being sons and daughters, being sisters, being caretakers. This speaks deeply to my heart. So I wanted to share the amount of gratitude. And I know you, particularly Dr. Jenkins, we get emails from you all sort of times. You've been responding directly to a lot of the emails. And so I want to just say, like, I don't think there is enough gratitude that can be spoken tonight that will encompass the amount of gratitude that I feel for all of you that have been working around the clock to make sure that that we are on top of the situation. What I'm about to say, I don't think it's by no means going to be popular, but it is really aligned to my commitment to really understand how I show up as a school board member, and how I address my own desire to support and to perpetuate white supremacy and whiteness as culture. And one of the things that we know about whiteness is that we want to control every single aspect. And for me, one of the biggest lessons around COVID is that we can try, or we can hurt ourselves, we can hurt others, we can be disrespectful to others, we can scrutinize others, we can try to micromanage the crap of everything around us. And it's unlikely that we will succeed. COVID is bigger than anything. And to me, that's one of the biggest lessons around what we are experiencing. I spoke earlier with Dr. Jenkins around my understanding of vaccines, and I am in full support of vaccines. I'm full support of our staff to be vaccinated. I also understand the history of vaccines in our country and in the world. We are not going to be 100% safe, even after a lot of people get vaccinated. And I do think that we're going to be that I think the role of schools and educational institutions are going to be as a practice ground for a culture shift in our country and all over the world. Culture around wearing masks, culture around washing our hands, culture around distancing, culture around how do we take care of ourselves and our bodies and our loved ones. I think we can be here for another 24 hours, and there's two going to be questions. One of the topics that are the greatest concern for me is specifically when we try to control a lot of the aspects of both what we are experiencing and what we're about to experience in regards to reopening, and the zones of unknowns that we're going to navigate is our collective mental health. I really hope that we continue to prioritize the mental health of our students. Also understanding that adults that are going to be coming into the building have been impacted significantly. Their mental health had been impacted significantly, both from experiencing the mental health of their own children, of loved ones, or grief and loss, and all the other uncertainties that we're navigating. So, to me, what feels the most important is for us to remember our humanity around this and the amount of work that human beings are putting towards this reopening plan, and that, to me, that feels what our children are going to remember about this time. That we as board members supported each other and supported the leadership of the district to continue to provide the best possible service we can think of right now. We certainly are not going to make 100% right decisions. I can speak as an educator. I don't feel like I fully comprehend everything about COVID. I'm not going to pretend to do so. I'm not going to pretend to understand every single aspect. I'm not going to pretend to understand what's, likely to happen or not likely to happen. What I do know for certain is that a lot of things that we didn't ask today, that we didn't think about, will certainly happen. And for me, what feels most important, that we still be a body that hold ourselves accountable for the decisions that we did not know that we're making. So I just wanted to say those things. And I had just one question around mental health, but Savian did a fantastic job on reaching that. And I really appreciate everyone's questions tonight. I think they were really illuminating. And thank you so much, Dr. Jenkins and the entire MSD team for the sharpness around this really challenging time that we're experiencing. And thank you, Ali, for bringing children to our videos. That's what we needed to have right now. Hi, Isa.
Thank you, Ananda, for your wonderful words. Julia, did you have anything?
Sure. I did have one question about beyond sports. I was wondering if, especially for high school level, if students are going to be able to meet in like academic clubs or non-athletic extracurriculars. Like, for example, in school, is there any plan for students being able to meet in their usual lunch clubs or anything like that?
Julia, Jack Bell is at Memorial with you, and he's going to be looking you up. But Mr. Slits, who's not with us here today, but Mr. Hernandez is here. We're going to be looking. That's why when I said earlier, co-curricular, it's not just athletics. Co-curricular entails all of our clubs and athletics. So we're going to have that student group, and we had talked about it with Student Senate, that we're going to form, and getting students, in particular those students, remember we talked about the students from La Follette, getting representation in there to get you guys voices, and we're going to start getting coaches. So when I said we're going to formulate that committee, Mr. Slits is going to work with that, and Mr. Hernandez. And yes, we're looking at those levels of co-curricular. How can you do it socially distanced? That's what we have to figure out, though. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Great. Looks like everybody has asked questions. Thank you, Dr. Jenkins, for all your work in just responding to emails and questions and leading our staff through this, challenging times. I think back of when we made the decision to close schools because of COVID, and I saw an amazing reaction from our community, and that is we all came together. Community came together to support during this time of crisis in many different ways, in supporting our students and our families. And I just ask that our community continue to guide us, lead us, support our students and families during this crisis. Very unprecedented times. We are on unmarked territory here. We won't always get it right. But I know, and I am confident that Dr. Jenkins and his staff are really keeping students at the center and our families at the center in making these decisions. And so it is not perfect. It wasn't perfect when we went to virtual learning. We made a lot of mistakes. And I understand the seriousness of this decision and how this will impact our students and our families, our teachers, our staff. But I am confident that we will get past this. I do not have any additional questions. A lot of great questions were asked. I do ask that we continue a very transparent process of providing information to our community, including our teachers and our staff, about what reopening will look like. Things are going to change, right? We got to expect that. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, unfortunately. We don't know what's going to happen next week. It's ever evolving. And so we have to be able to change trajectory when we have to. But we've done that. We've been there. And I just got to say, I'm so proud of this board. Out of all the board, I mean, you guys have continued to be resilient, strong, asking tough questions, engaging our community, and through this, showing up, leaning in. That's what this board has done and continues to do. And so thank you for your continued work. We will continue to have these conversations. I think we have to have them. When is our next Facebook Live session? When Ananda comes back, because she's so good at it.
Yeah. We have another one coming up. We have them every month for the rest of the year, so we can continue to engage our community seriously. And I can't miss the opportunity to say thank you to the board for how you guys have been there so much, asking the tough questions. You really do, and I appreciate that. But I have to also say, this staff, they've been just phenomenal. The teachers and the administrators, they have been, just the work that our people are doing in virtual. It's some really wonderful things out there, and we're going to be highlighting them for doing that. But I want to thank the APP and MTI for their work. And we are in this together. We may have some hiccups sometimes between us, but so do we as family members, right? So we're all in this together, and we're going to stand there up for our students, for our teachers and our administrators. Not that we're all going to be on the same page, but we're going to stay in it together, even if I have to wrestle them to the ground. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for showing up tonight. And if there's no further questions, a quick happy birthday to Nichelle Nichols. And can I get a motion to adjourn?
Yep.
She's going to hate me for doing that, but happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Nichelle.
Happy birthday, Sora.
Yeah.
Also, happy birthday to Patrice Hutchins, who was on with us tonight and was amazing.
Okay.
And celebrated her birthday this weekend.
I didn't know
So
it was your birthday. Okay.
Happy birthday.
Also.
I will second Ananda's motion to adjourn.
Okay. All those in favor?
Julia,
Julia, your advisory vote?
Aye.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Nurse Sally. Thank you, Nurse Sally. Yeah.
Thank you, Sally. Thank you, everyone.
All right.
I'll stay warm out here.
Yeah.